Chapter 29:10. After so many years, most of the celestial venerables had returned to the frosty plain and continued to do what they were doing. However, the general situation had stabilized before, and the strength of each force was about the same. Very few forces took the initiative to start a war, because this might allow a third party to benefit from it. The whole world was not peaceful now, but there were basically no large-scale wars. It was as if they had come to a flourishing age of martial art. Although the competition was extremely fierce, the overall environment was good. Ling Han returned to the Lin family's ancestral land and asked Lin Xiaoyang and the others. He told them about the previous situation, which surprised Lin Xiaoyang and the others. Frenzy's creation can actually combine. There has never been such a situation before. This should be a special case. Otherwise, we should have seen it long ago in the extraterritorial battlefield. Yes, even with Frenzy's methods, he has only cultivated over 100 people after so many years. This should not be enough to cause a disaster. After the 3 6-step elites discussed seriously, they felt that there was no need to be too vigilant. When they heard that they were also remnants of Frenzy, they couldn't help but laugh. This Frenzy really played a trick of sowing discord. Ling Han talked for a long time with the three of them. The 3 elites were very gentle and encouraged him, looking forward to his future achievements. He left and returned to his own Ling city. The large black dog, heavenly venerable original birth, Ji Wuming, and the others had returned long ago. Their strength had improved greatly. After all, there were too many fortunes in that lost plane. For example, Ji Wuming and Fire Hibiscus had already rushed to the 3rd step, and even the large black dog had reached the 2nd step. This made Ling Han feel that the heavens were blind. What heavens? Grandpa Dog should be born wise and mighty, and dictate the world. The large black dog boasted shamelessly. If the heavens are not in my favor, Grandpa Dog will slaughter the heavens. In the end, Ling Han kicked him into a ditch. The current situation was very harmonious. Everyone cultivated, and when they were bored, they would discuss martial art. It seemed that the world was really peaceful. However, not long after, someone came to make trouble. This was a 6th-step Empyrean, Yu Chunwang's father Yu Borong. Back then, Yu Chunwang had died at the hands of Ling Han. After Yu Borong learned of this, he would definitely want to capture Ling Han and kill him as a sacrifice. It was just that back then, everyone had been searching for primordial stone veins. This was too important. An expert like Yu Borong was able to pick up and let go. Naturally, he knew which to place first. Moreover, it was extremely difficult to find a person in that plane, so Yu Furong naturally wouldn't waste her time. Now that the situation was set, Yu Borong had a lot of time, so she naturally wanted to avenge her son. However, Zhou Heng and the other 2 were full of expectations for Ling Han. How could they hand him over? Yu Borong was extremely domineering. He threatened that if the 3 of them did not hand over Ling Han, a war would be unavoidable. Since Zhou Heng and the other 2 were able to reach the 6th step, they must have been through a lot. How could they be frightened by such a threat? They were fearless. If you want to fight, then we'll give you a war. As soon as the 2 sides clashed, they each summoned a large number of people to confront each other at the outermost periphery of the Lin family's ancestral land. But just as the battle erupted, the 6th-step experts on both sides all pricked up their ears to listen. After a long time, they all looked shocked. Go back, Yu Borong immediately said. He waved his hand, and the people under his command immediately retreated like the tide. Why did they suddenly stop fighting? Ling Han naturally couldn't stay out of this. He had been standing on the side all this time, and now he was also very dumbfounded. The battle had already been so fierce, and the important figures of both sides were just missing a wave of their hands. Then a bloody battle would ensue. But now they had actually retreated. How strange. Lin Xiaoyang said in a booming voice. I just received a message from a 7th-step supremacy. The energy storm in the extraterritorial battlefield is quickly dissipating, and it is very likely that it will stabilize within 1 billion years. What? When everyone heard this, they all turned pale with fright. The extraterritorial battlefield was about to reopen? Didn't they say that the energy storm would last for an endless amount of time? Why did they suddenly say that it would disappear within 1 billion years? Don't think that 1 billion years was very long. To a celestial venerable, they might not even be able to advance a small step. Based on this, 1 billion years was really very short. Moreover, once the energy storm passed, the Frenzy army would definitely make a comeback. They had to immediately build up the city's defenses. Otherwise, if they had to face the Frenzy army that had accumulated strength for hundreds of billions of years, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. Why? How was this possible? Back then, when the energy storm had swept, even the seventh-step supremacy was certain. This kind of situation was very likely to continue forever. But how long had it been now? Not even 1/100th of an era had passed. Everyone was at a loss. Did they have to go back to face that terrifying Frenzy army again? This made many people feel at a loss, and they started to hate war. There was a saying that it was easy to be extravagant from frugality, but it was difficult to be extravagant from extravagance. Similarly, how many people would still be as firm as iron when they were used to ease and comfort, and had to throw themselves into that bloody and cruel war? But what could they do? Everyone knew that as long as Frenzy successfully invaded, only death awaited them. Many people started to suspect whether the energy storm back then was a conspiracy created by Frenzy to make them accustomed to ease and comfort, to destroy their fighting spirit, and even to make them kill each other, greatly weakening their strength. Zhou Heng and the other two naturally had such a guess. It was just that they didn't expect this day to come so quickly. They originally thought that there would be a buffer period of 1 or 2 eras. Fortunately, the discovery of the ancient plane had made the surviving heavenly venerables a lot stronger. This was good news. But at the same time, there was also bad news, extremely bad news. After so many years of killing each other, the idea that others were unreliable had been planted in the hearts of the heavenly venerables. How could they still trust their comrades and entrust their backs to others? But no matter what, this was a war that they had to face. All the sixth-step powerhouses took action, bringing the remaining heavenly venerables to the foreign battlefield. As expected, the energy storm was quickly dissipating, like a receding tide. Even though this battlefield was incomparably huge, if both sides were to recede at the same time, in fact, it would only take about 1 billion years for the energy storm to completely disappear. At that time, they would be able to see Frenzy's army charging over from the other side. Advance. We have to set up a front line as much as possible. As the energy storm receded, they advanced. Soon they arrived at the overlapping space. In the past, this place was divided into 8 levels, corresponding to the 8 realms from quasi-heavenly venerables to the 7th step. Although the 7th step could also enter the first space, their combat strength would be suppressed, and they wouldn't be able to use their full strength. This was a dimensional war, and the rules of the war were determined by the origin world. Even the 7th step had to follow the rules of the game. But when they arrived, they found that the space here was severely damaged. End of this chapter. Chapter 29:11. How serious? The 1st to 6th layers were squeezed together, while the 7th and 8th layers still existed independently. The 1st to 6th layers were squeezed together, while the 7th and 8th layers still existed independently. This kind of spatial compression couldn't be restored, and even celestial venerables couldn't do anything about it, because it involved the origin world itself. Even if one was as strong as a 7th-step expert, could he fight against such a huge origin world? In other words, 5th-step celestial venerables and below would have to stay in one space to fight. Zhou Heng and the other 6th-step experts immediately discussed and divided the team into 2. One team was naturally at 6th step, while the other team was at 5th step. They would go to the first layer to set up defense. Under the leadership of the 6th-step experts, the other team would be commanded by these 3 people. Ling Yulian, Xian Qihu, and Wu Haoyang had all advanced to 5th step. After so many years, they had finally advanced a step further. No one was unconvinced, and even the veteran 5th-step experts didn't object. These 3 5th-step experts were too powerful, and their battle prowess was enough to soar to 6th step. With them overseeing things, it was safer than having a few 6th-step experts. because in this first layer, their realms were suppressed to 5th step. So who was more powerful at 5th step? Of course, it was the 3 greatest geniuses of all time. However, this wasn't good news for Ling Han, because he saw Xianqihu casting a cold and awe-inspiring gaze at him, as if he was already a dead man. Damn, this guy would definitely use his position to avenge his personal grudge and make a move on him. He was the commander-in-chief, so he was completely capable of arranging for Ling Han to be under his command. When there was a frenzy of attacks, he would arrange for Ling Han to be placed in the most dangerous place. Once Ling Han died, he would be able to extract his soul and obtain all of Ling Han's secrets. He could even do it himself and throw the crime to frenzy. But what if Ling Han objected and ran away? Didn't he know that the punishment for deserters in the extraterritorial battlefield was incomparably cruel? As long as Ling Han dared to run away, Xianqihu would be able to attack him openly and confidently. After thinking about it, this seemed to be a dead end. Ling Han, come, Lin Yulian suddenly said. From now on, you are my deputy general. Ling Han was astonished. Lin Yulian was publicly protecting him. Xianqihu immediately revealed a look of dissatisfaction. But he did not say anything. He only sneered. Obviously, it was impossible for him to let the matter rest. Many thanks, Miss Lin. Ling Han sent a voice transmission to Lin Yulian. Lin Yulian only nodded. Her beautiful eyes looked forward with a hint of worry. Now that frenzy had made a comeback, it could be said that it was accumulating power and waiting. What awaited them was definitely an army that could topple mountains and overturn seas. However, after so many years of internal strife, not only had they used up too many experts, but their hearts were also not united. Would they be completely routed in one wave of attacks? She sighed in her heart. But no matter what, they had to hold their ground. Otherwise, chaos would push the front lines forward. After losing a large amount of territory, the strength of the Firefrost Plain would be greatly weakened, and they would be in an extremely disadvantageous position. The team advanced step by step, and layers of city defenses began to be built. This was their path of retreat. At most, they only had 1 billion years, so they had to make the best use of their time. Time continued to pass, and the whole team advanced very mechanically. The construction of city walls was naturally completed by celestial kings, and sometimes quasi-celestial venerables would also go to help. At this time, who dared to talk about their status? The atmosphere was so oppressive, and from time to time, there would be internal strife and great battles. But the reason for this was actually insignificant. This was because the pressure was too great, and everyone's nerves were stretched taut. They also became easily impulsive and manic. Although Lin Yulian and the other two were the most talented geniuses throughout the ages, and their martial prowess could crush everyone here, they were helpless when faced with the changes in people's hearts. 100 million years, 200 million years passed, and they also built layer after layer of city defenses. After more than 900 million years, they did not advance anymore. Instead, they began to strengthen the last layer of city defense. This was their first line of defense against Frenzy's army. Everyone was making their final preparations to deal with the great battle that was about to come. However, people's hearts had really changed. Even if there were extremely strict rules that prohibited people from causing trouble and killing people, such things would happen from time to time. After all, there were only 3 people in Lin Yulian's group. In the end, various forces were established in the fortress, and just like before, they formed their own cliques. In this way, the matter of private killings was actually stopped. On this day, Ji Wuming, the large black dog, and the others came to find Ling Han. Boss, let's also establish a force, said. Ling Han smiled and said, haven't we been together for a long time? This is different. Everyone else has established their own forces, and there are obvious symbols on their clothes, so people can see with a single glance, said. Let's also go and get a set of uniform, so that people can see that we are from the Ling Alliance, and they won't dare to provoke us. Woof woof woof. Grandpa Dog was almost slaughtered, and made into braised dog meat a few days ago. Look, Grandpa Dog's tail is already bald. The large black dog turned around, and his tail could be seen poking out of his iron underwear. It was completely bald. Ling Han laughed loudly. Haven't you always been very sneaky? How did you end up in such a miserable state? Damn brat, Grandpa Dog was almost killed by someone, and you are still laughing. The large black dog stomped his foot. Ling Han nodded. All right, let's also establish an alliance here, and officially establish a sect. They acted swiftly, and immediately began to make preparations, announcing the establishment of the Ling Alliance to everyone. Ling Han would be the alliance leader, and the heavenly venerables in the alliance were the Empress, Hu Niu the Rain Emperor, the original birth heavenly venerable, the large black dog, Ling Jianshui, Ling Fifan, Ji Wuming, Fire Lotus, Shichanzi, and so on. There were not many heavenly venerables, but with Ling Han overseeing the alliance, this was a powerful sign. After another few 100,000 years, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing returned. Beyond Ling Han's expectations, Fu Tianxing not only advanced into the heavenly venerable tier, but even rushed up 3 steps in a single breath. In terms of cultivation level, he was already not inferior to his master, and Ling Shi was not far behind, also reaching 3 steps. This caused Ling Han to sigh with emotion. His daughter's strength was within his expectations, but he had not thought that this disciple that had been abducted by his daughter would also be so freakish, and it was very likely that he would surpass her. Of course, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing had only caught up in terms of cultivation level, but in terms of battle prowess at the same cultivation level, there was no one that could compare with Ling Han. Like Ling Shi, Fu Tianxing had also contained a small world, formed from the collision of 2 planes. As long as he continued to grow stronger, his future would be limitless, and it was very possible that he would become the second Xian Qihu and Wu Haoyang. The return of these 2 people caused the strength of the Ling Alliance to increase greatly, and Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing also fell in love and were preparing to consummate their marriage. When Ling Han found out about this, he almost could not help but kill Fu Tianxing. End of this chapter. Chapter 29:13. After the battle ended, the surviving Empyreans immediately began to recover. The next battle could happen at any time, so he had to maintain himself in peak condition. Otherwise, he might not be able to participate in the next battle alive. In just 3 years, the frenzied army made a comeback. The frenzy army set up camp and didn't attack immediately. In the past, the frenzy army didn't do this. They would attack as soon as they appeared, because they didn't have intelligence. They only had the thought of killing and fighting. In the past, the army of chaos wouldn't have done this. They would attack as soon as they appeared, because they didn't have a mind of their own. Their only thought was to kill and fight. The frenzy army only wanted numbers and combat power, but it didn't give them the intelligence they deserved. Frenzied creation only sought quantity and combat power, but would not give them the intelligence they should have. For the frenzy, free will was a kind of poison. To avoid trouble, it skipped the intelligence link. Anyway, its creation was simple. Even if it used 100 celestial venerables to exchange for 1 celestial venerables in the frostflame plane, it would be worth it. To madness, free will was a kind of poison. In order to avoid trouble, it directly skipped over the step of intelligence. In any case, its creation was simple. Even if it used 100 celestial venerables to exchange for 1 celestial venerables from the fiery frost dimension, it would be worth it. Of course, it could also give intelligence and strength and control, but this would greatly increase the difficulty of its creation. The number of troops it could create at the same time would be reduced by 100 or even 1,000 times. Therefore, the frenzy army didn't have intelligence and was a product of compromise. But now, the frenzy army actually knew how to set up camp. This naturally didn't surprise everyone. They even felt a chill. If these armies really developed intelligence, then with their overwhelming numbers, what kind of terrifying combat power would they have? Just thinking about it made people shudder. If the frenzy army didn't attack, of course, the Frostflame army wouldn't take the initiative to attack. If they lost the defense of the city walls, they would lose their biggest advantage. This was too dangerous. This situation lasted for thousands of years. Finally, the frenzy army launched a new wave of attacks. Of course, it wasn't as strong as the last time. After all, it was a force that had been accumulated for hundreds of billions of years. How could they gather such a terrifying force in just a few thousand years? But this time, the frenzy army split into hundreds of scattered troops, each led by a monster, and attacked the city walls. Everyone could clearly see that although the monsters in the lead looked terrible, their eyes were filled with the light of wisdom. They finally understood that most of the frenzy army was simple-minded. They only knew how to fight and kill. However, frenzy had given these monster leaders considerable intelligence. They were celestial lords after all. Once they were given intelligence, they should continue to improve. It was unknown whether they would betray frenzy one day, but at this stage, they would definitely not be easy to deal with. As long as they commanded reasonably, the frenzy army's strength would be greatly improved. The battle was very difficult. The city wall was lost and gained and lost back and forth, a constant tug-of-war. Although the number of soldiers this time was much smaller, it took them more than half a year to finally annihilate all of the frenzy army. Naturally, the Flame Frost army paid a greater price. The only fortunate thing was that the Empyreans that had died on their side were basically at the first or second step. Their main combat strength hadn't suffered too much damage, but their follow-up attacks had suffered heavy losses. The short peace only lasted for 7 years before the frenzy army appeared again. This time, they set up camp outside the city. This made all the celestial venables tremble. They believed that they could not allow the frenzy army to accumulate troops like this. Otherwise, the losses would be too terrible. Lin Yulian and the other two summoned the other fifth-step powerhouses to discuss how to deal with this new frenzy army. Although Ling Han was only at Celestial Venable's 3rd Celestial Venables, his combat power was at Celestial Venable's 5th Celestial Venables. Naturally, he was also invited. Everyone offered their suggestions. No matter how much conflict they had before, they had to work together to deal with the frenzy army. Everyone understood this. Some advocated taking the initiative to attack. They could not give the frenzy army time to accumulate troops. Others advocated carrying out Operation Behead. As long as the intelligent leaders were killed, the frenzy army would return to its original state. Some advocated taking the initiative to attack. They didn't want to give the frenzy army any time to accumulate their forces. Some advocated taking action. As long as the intelligent leaders were killed, the frenzy army would return to its original state. There would be no difference. If they took the initiative to attack, they would not give the frenzy army time to accumulate troops. Others advocated carrying out Operation Behead. As long as the intelligent leaders were killed, the frenzy army would return to its original state. Operation Behead. This was possible. But how could they sneak into the enemy's camp and kill several leaders, who were at least at the Celestial Venerable level? Should Xian Chihu and the other two, who had the combat power of a 6th-step powerhouse, do it? The problem was that a 6th-step powerhouse was not a god in front of a 5th-step powerhouse. There were at least tens of thousands of 5th-step powerhouses in the frenzy army. If they fell into the encirclement of these powerhouses, even a 6th-step powerhouse would be beaten to death. These 3 people were too important. Who would dare to let them take the risk? If these 3 people could not be moved, who would be sent to carry out this mission? I suggest that Ling Han go. Xian Chihu suddenly said. Although Ling Han is only a 3rd-step powerhouse, his combat power can sweep away almost all 5th-step powerhouses. He is the most suitable person to complete this mission. Lin Yulian was about to object, but she saw that many 5th-step powerhouses had already nodded slowly. Some people really felt that Ling Han was suitable for this mission, while others hoped that he would die. For example, Na Lan Xiong, whose brother had been killed by Ling Han, and Qi Xian, whose ally Fei Wu, had been killed by Ling Han. Let's vote. Those who think that Ling Han should go, please raise your hand. Xian Chihu did not give Lin Yulian a chance to speak. He directly went to the stage where everyone voted. More than half of the people raised their hands. This matter was directly sealed in the coffin. Ling Han, this mission will be handed over to you. You are in charge of choosing your teammates. Quality over quantity, a maximum of 10 people. Otherwise, you will not even need to get close to them. You will be discovered, Xian Chihu said seriously. This seemed to be supporting Ling Han, but this was similar to a suicide mission. Who would be willing to go with Ling Han? It should be known that in order to go to the enemy's camp, one had to have the combat power of a fifth-step powerhouse. Now that all the fifth-step powerhouses were here, it was clear how difficult this mission was. Who would be stupid enough to go with Ling Han? What if Ling Han refused? Perhaps Xian Chihu would fly into a rage and kill Ling Han for disobeying orders. On the battlefield, the most taboo thing was disobeying orders. Ling Han looked at Xian Chihu in surprise. He had never seen this guy before. How could he be so vicious? Don't waste time. Otherwise, the number of frenzy soldiers will increase, and it will be even more impossible to succeed. Xian Chihu revealed a smile and looked at Ling Han. Within 3 days, choose the members of the team. You must come out. End of chapter. Chapter 29:14. There was no room for refusal, and no room for argument. Xian Chihu brought out his authority as the commander-in-chief, and directly gave Ling Han a mission that could be said to be extremely dangerous. He looked at Ling Han with a faint smile, a hint of arrogance at the corner of his mouth. This was telling Ling Han that he had done this on purpose, but did he have the ability to bite him? You couldn't. You could only accept it. At this moment, Ling Han truly wanted to wash his hands of this matter. Fuck, he had come to deal with the frenzy army, not to be bullied, and definitely not to be tricked. However, he quickly suppressed this thought. Xian Chihu could use his position to take revenge, but he couldn't let his emotions affect his decisions. It could be said that if there was anyone in this world who could truly deal with the problem of frenzy, it would be him. Although Ling Han couldn't absorb the life essence of the frenzy soldiers who had died in battle, under intense battles, his cultivation would increase faster than cultivating in seclusion. This was because he was a battle maniac. Using battle to nurture battle was the fastest way for him to improve himself. Here, his cultivation speed was the fastest, and no one knew how much time they had left. Frenzy's attacks came one after another. Even a 7th-step cultivator could only barely hold back its main body. It couldn't pull away at all. It was needless to say who was better and who was worse. He had to quickly increase his cultivation and reach the 6th or 7th step. That way, even if the planar power in his body wasn't complete, he would at least have unlimited possibilities as a 7th-step cultivator. Thus, Ling Han swallowed his anger and looked straight at Xian Chihu. This bastard. What kind of prodigy was he? He was using his position to take revenge. When he reached the 4th or 5th step, he would definitely beat this bastard up. So what if there was a 7th-step cultivator behind him? He would definitely kill him. Go! Xian Chihu waved his hand, looking like he was chasing him away. Ling Han didn't say anything. He just turned and left. Soon Lin Yulian walked over. Ling Han, do you blame me? She asked apologetically. Ling Han shook his head. This has nothing to do with you. Lin Yulian, however, said, during this expedition, elder brother repeatedly told me to follow Xian Chihu's orders. If he makes a decision, I cannot disobey. Oh, there is such a thing. Ling Han was surprised. Lin Xiaoyang shouldn't be unaware of the conflict between him and Xian Chihu, right? Why would he deliberately add a band-tightening curse on Lin Yulian? Did Lin Xiaoyang not expect Xian Chihu to be so short-sighted and use his position to avenge a personal grudge? Or did he have other intentions? Ling Han thought about it and immediately shook his head. There was absolutely no problem with Lin Xiaoyang. A mission is a mission, but whether or not I can complete it is another matter. Lin Yulian said. No one said that a mission must be successful, especially such a big mission. Do you understand? Ling Han nodded. What Lin Yulian meant was that this mission only needed to go through the formalities. Going deep into the enemy's camp was simply an act of suicide. However, Ling Han was unafraid, because he could travel through the origin world. With his current strength, even this foreign battlefield couldn't stop him from traveling as he wished. Thus, he had no problem protecting himself. This was also the reason why he did not become hostile on the spot. He wanted to see what kind of expression Xian Chihu would have when he returned with the corpse of the frenzy army's leader. Lin Yulian quickly left. She was one of the commanders and had many things to deal with. Ling Han! Someone called from outside his stone house. Ling Han walked out to take a look, but saw that the other party was an unfamiliar fifth-step elite. Nalan Xiong. The expert introduced himself with a fierce look in his eyes. Ling Han suddenly understood. This was Nalan Xiong's elder brother. Had he come to take revenge for his brother's death? You want to sign up for this mission? He smiled. Brother Nalan really cares about the world. I admire you. Come. Let us create history together, so that future generations will forever remember Brother Nalan. Fuck. Nalan Xiong was dumbfounded. He had come to see Ling Han make a fool of himself. He had taken the opportunity to ridicule him. It didn't matter if Ling Han acted on impulse, or if he went to the enemy's camp, or if he disobeyed orders. It would be a terrible thing for Ling Han. But Ling Han wanted him to join the mission? Create history together, my ass. That was suicide. Besides, Ling Han had said that he would only remember him. That meant that he was going to die. Why didn't you die? Nalan Xiong had heard that Ling Han was a vicious person, but he had never thought that he could be that vicious. Nalan Xiong had only said a few simple words to make him feel depressed. Come, give me your handprint. Then you'll be part of my suicide squad. No, I'll be part of the mission. Ling Han took out a piece of paper and reached out to grab Nalan Xiong so that he could give him his handprint. Fuck. Nalan Xiong hadn't been able to breathe yet, so he quickly moved aside and said, Ling Han, don't cause trouble. Why are you being so humble? It's a great achievement to be able to contribute to the origin world. People will definitely remember your sacrifice. Ling Han smiled and grabbed Nalan Xiong's hand. He was so strong that Nalan Xiong couldn't shake him off. Nalan Xiong's face turned green. If he gave him his handprint, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. Even if he wanted to join the mission, he didn't need to give him his handprint. At the level of a celestial, no oath could bind them, but it was still humiliating. In the future, when people talked about it, they would say that Nalan Xiong had given him his handprint, but he had run away. Nobody would care about the truth. They would just understand it the way they wanted to. Nalan Xiong tried his best to resist, but Ling Han was too strong. Even though he was at the late stage of the fifth step, he wasn't much stronger than Ling Han. The two of them were fighting like gangsters on the streets. Nalan Xiong's face turned green. He shouted and a rune lit up. His strength increased exponentially. Ling Han laughed and activated a rune. Not only did his strength increase, but he was also able to suppress Nalan Xiong. He grabbed Nalan Xiong's hand and gave him a handprint. Ling Han, have you had enough? Shouted Nalan Xiong furiously. It's not stained. Let's do it again, said Ling Han. He cut Nalan Xiong's hand with his finger. Blood spurted out. Don't waste so much blood. Let's make a handprint. Slap. He forced Nalan Xiong's hand onto the paper. Damn it. Nalan Xiong shouted. Power surged out of his body. Pa. The piece of paper immediately shattered into pieces. He had finally managed to break free from Ling Han's control. He glared at Ling Han with eyes full of anger. It was as if he wanted to skin Ling Han alive. Nalan Xiong had come to see Ling Han make a fool of himself. He had wanted to take the opportunity to ridicule him. How had things turned out like this? He had been humiliated by Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head and sighed. Nalan Xiong, I despise you for not participating in such a great cause. Chapter in Cell Phone Reading. Chapter 29:15. If Nalan Xiong was strong enough, he would definitely kill Ling Han. If Nalan Xiong was strong enough, he would definitely kill Ling Han. He couldn't take it anymore. Why didn't you come to sign up? What are you doing here? Ling Han sat down and crossed his legs. Nalan Xiong wanted to say that he was here to laugh at Ling Han, but after what he had just experienced, he couldn't say that. He was the real joke. Ling Han, I'd like to see how you're going to come back alive, he said darkly. You don't have to worry about that. Ling Han waved his hand. I'm not related to you in any way. It's not good for you to stick to me like this. Those who know will know that you're trying to flatter me. But those who don't know will think that there's something wrong with your sexual orientation. This. Nalan Xiong was dumbfounded again. Ling Han was too evil. He wanted to vomit blood. You can only talk now. I'd like to see who would join your suicide squad. He calmed down. After all, he was a celestial venerable. Ling Han laughed and said, "You're worrying for nothing again." Nalan Xiong took a few steps back and sat down in a corner of the city wall. There were only 3 days, so he wanted to see Ling Han's disappointed expression. No one would be stupid enough to travel with Ling Han. Actually, it wasn't difficult for Ling Han to find people to travel with him. The Empress, Hunyo the Rain Emperor, and the others would definitely agree without hesitation. But how could Ling Han let them take the risk? Moreover, those who didn't have the battle prowess of level 5 wouldn't be of much help. It was better for Ling Han to go alone. He could escape as soon as he saw that the situation was not right. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days passed by very quickly, yet not a single person came to find Ling Han of their own volition, wanting to join this mission. This was within Ling Han's expectations, so he didn't care at all. The cold smile on Nalan Xiong's face was getting bigger and bigger. He wanted to see Ling Han's helpless face the next day. It would make him feel even better. But at this moment, a man walked over from afar. When he arrived in front of Ling Han's stone house, he stopped and said to Nalan Xiong, "Is this Ling Han's residence, Brother Ling?" "Damn, you think I'm a doorman?" Nalan Xiong's facial expression became very unsightly. He wanted to punch someone, but he didn't. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but the other party was also at the 5th step. Fu Yuan had only taken several tens of billions of years to take the 5th step, but his momentum was astonishing, and it was very likely that his strength was no less than his own. Besides, the other party didn't say anything insulting. If he acted rashly, he would definitely be in the wrong in the end, and he might have to apologize to the other party under pressure. He snorted and pretended not to hear anything. "Looking for me?" Ling Han pushed open the door and walked out. Fu Yuan smiled and said, "Brother Ling, I'm Fu Yuan. I'm here to ask if there's a spot left for you." Nalan Xiong was surprised. From the way this person was talking, it seemed like he wanted to join them. Did a donkey kick him in the head? Even if you're tired of living, you don't need to commit suicide like that. You'll die without a corpse. Ling Han was also surprised and said, "There's a spot. Does Brother Fu want to join us?" "It depends on whether you want to or not," said Fu Yuan with a smile. Ling Han smiled and said, "Brother Fu, don't you know that this mission is extremely dangerous?" Fu Yuan laughed and said, "If it wasn't so dangerous, then it would be very boring." Ling Han's eyes lit up. He was slightly surprised by this reply, but he also felt a sense of appreciation for the fact that this was a kindred spirit. "If Brother Fu isn't afraid of death, then there's a spot for you here," said Nalan Xiong. "All right." Fu Yuan nodded and sat down next to him. Nalan Xiong was very surprised. He had thought that there would be no one else who would travel with Ling Han, but now Fu Yuan's appearance had shocked him greatly. Fu Yuan was a 5th step celestial master, and he wasn't just some random kid. "Brother Nalan, are you coming with us?" asked Fu Yuan. Nalan Xiong waved his hand. He didn't want to be held hostage by morality. "Oh, then why is Brother Nalan here?" Fu Yuan didn't understand. Ling Han laughed and said, "I want to know too." Nalan Xiong's face turned red. He was making a sacrifice, and they didn't want to support him, but they were actually here to laugh at him. What kind of a joke was that? Nalan Xiong didn't want to lose face, so he angrily ran away. Ling Han and Fu Yuan exchanged a look, and then both burst out laughing. "Brother Fu, do you know that this mission is extremely dangerous?" asked Ling Han. Fu Yuan nodded. "I've reached a cultivation bottleneck. I need to experience life and death to help me break through." "All right, then we'll help each other," said Ling Han. With the help of a 5th step celestial master, he was a bit more confident. The two of them waited for a while, and the 3rd day finally came to an end. However, there was no second person who ran over to register. This was also within Ling Han's expectations. In truth, the fact that Fu Yuan had participated was already very surprising to him. "Let's go." Ling Han left the immortal visitor residence behind. Even if he could travel through space at will, he had already fallen out with Frenzy. What if he was caught? Even if Frenzy couldn't use his main body's power, he could still use a clone of the 6th step celestial master. He had to take another step before he could truly roam the world. The two of them left the city walls and retracted their auras, heading towards the enemy camp. Although the frenzy army camp was thousands of miles away, to a celestial master, such a distance was nothing. After a short while, the two of them arrived outside the camp. They shook their bodies and changed their forms, becoming similar to the frenzy army. Anyway, they had many arms and legs and were extremely ugly. Then their auras became cold and evil. They couldn't imitate the aura of a fifth-step celestial master. But it wasn't a problem for them to imitate a fourth-step or three-step celestial master. Of course, this could only fool them. If they tried to distinguish their auras, they wouldn't be able to hide them at all. The two of them swaggered into the frenzy camp. Most of the monsters here were mindless killing machines, and they were all resting under orders. The entire camp was deathly silent like a graveyard. This was very strange. It was a camp with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but it was so quiet. Where can we find them? Fu Yuan asked with his divine sense. Although they were disguised as the frenzy army, everyone else was resting, and they were the only ones moving around. This was too obvious. Although this was a camp, the army of mayhem didn't need tents. The entire army sat on the ground like statues, their eyes closed. Although they looked different, they all felt the same. How could they find their leader? If they're given intelligence, they'll definitely be different, Ling Han said to himself. He pulled Fu Yuan to sit down, then released his divine sense to explore. End of chapter. Chapter 29:17. Ling Han instantly made a decision. He burst forth with all his strength and charged at Fu Yuan. The leaders kept giving orders, not using all their strength to stop Ling Han's approach. The two of them were already surrounded. So what if they met? Brother Ling, don't worry about me. Break out yourself, Fu Yuan said. Although he was 5 steps strong, he was panting, and his body was covered in blood. Ling Han laughed loudly. We came together, so of course we have to go back together. Dream on. A monkey-like leader of the monsters said coldly. Xiao xiao xiao. Instantly, millions upon millions of arrows formed from power shot toward Ling Han and Fu Yuan. Under this volley of attacks, Ling Han and Fu Yuan would definitely suffer. Ling Han grabbed Fu Yuan. Brother Fu, be careful. He struck out again, tearing space apart and stepped in. Swish, the two of them instantly disappeared. They escaped into the void, the monkey muttered. It snorted. Other than Master, everyone is a headless fly in the void. Can you escape? These monsters all tore space apart, but the void was chaotic, and energy storms were everywhere. In an instant, many of the monsters were torn to pieces, but there was no sign of Ling Han and Fu Yuan. Strange, how did they escape? Without the plane coordinates, even Frenzy could not enter any plane at will. But what about Ling Han? Ling Han took another step, and had already returned to the fiery frost plane from the void. However, the corresponding fiery frost plane that he had taken a step out of the void was too far off. Thus, the place he was currently at was not the foreign battlefield at all. This is... Fu Yuan had just escaped death, and his face was still filled with shock. He looked around in shock. Frost plane. He looked at Ling Han. Brother Ling, you have the ability to travel between planes. If he had torn the void, he would not have been able to go far. He could only go back the way he came. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would be lost in the eternal void. And who knew how long it would take for him to return? But Ling Han had done it easily. Naturally, he was shocked. Ling Han smiled. I've said it before. Since we came together, of course, we have to go back together. Previously, when he said those words, Fu Yuan must have thought that it was just words of comfort. But now, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. I really didn't expect that Brother Ling actually has the ability to freely traverse between planes. Fu Yuan sighed with emotion. No wonder Brother Ling is so calm and composed. Even though he has accepted such a dangerous mission, he is still not flustered. Ling Han laughed out loud. I'm not as good as Brother Fu in this aspect. Brother Fu is the real brave one. I'm ashamed. I still had to rely on Brother Ling's help to escape with my life. Fu Yuan shook his head. Although we didn't manage to kill them all, we did kill 2 leaders. We can report back now. said Ling Han with a smile. Let's go back. The two of them returned to the foreign battleground a few days later. Everyone was shocked to see Ling Han and Fu Yuan. It wasn't like no one had seen Ling Han and Fu Yuan leave the city. Not long after, there was a huge commotion among the frenzied army, but it quickly calmed down. In everyone's opinion, Ling Han and Fu Yuan should have been killed. This was a very reasonable guess. How could they not die when surrounded? But now Ling Han and Fu Yuan actually returned alive. How could they not feel like they had seen a ghost? Soon the entire camp was in an uproar. Lin Yulian, Xian Qihu, and Wu Haoying immediately called for a meeting and invited Ling Han and Fu Yuan. Ling Han, did you complete the mission? Xian Qihu immediately asked. This will depend on how Brother Xian defines the word completed, Ling Han said with a smile. Xian Qihu snorted. Don't be so glib. All right. Ling Han nodded. Brother Fu and I went deep into the enemy's camp and killed 2 monsters. Do you have evidence? Xian Qihu continued. How would I know if you killed a few monsters outside and quietly slipped away? Hearing this, many fifth-step heavenly venerables frowned. Aren't you looking for trouble? The people of the Ling Alliance were even more indignant. This was too much. I knew you would ask this. Ling Han casually waved his hand, and 2 mutilated corpses appeared on the ground. Here, this is the evidence you wanted. It's just 2 corpses. What can they prove? Xian Qihu said lightly. Ling Han smiled. These 2 corpses still have some aura. Everyone here has fought against the frenzied creation for a long time. You should be able to tell the difference. Everyone focused their senses and quickly nodded. The aura of these 2 monsters was indeed different. They were not like other monsters that only had violent and cruel auras. In the face of such ironclad evidence, Xian Qihu had nothing to say. He could use his power to suppress others, but he could not distort the truth. After all, he still had Lin Yulian and Wu Haoying by his side. You only killed 2? Xian Qihu began to nitpick again. There are at least 5 leaders in the frenzied army. You only killed 2. How can you say you completed the mission? Ling Han smiled. I never said that I could definitely complete this mission. Also, do you think that's realistic? Everyone shook their heads. This was not realistic either. Previously, everyone thought that Ling Han would not return. They did not expect that not only would Ling Han return, but he had also killed 2 monsters. This was a great contribution. But not only did Xian Qihu not record Ling Han's contribution, he even made things difficult for Ling Han. This was too outrageous. Brother Xian, you've gone too far, Lin Yulian said. Her tone was cold. She was clearly angry. Wu Haoying also nodded. Although he had lost to Ling Han, he had only wanted to have a fair fight with Ling Han to prove himself. He had never thought of using any dishonest methods. Xian Qihu smiled. So what if everyone in the world objected? He did not need to take it to heart. Since the mission has not been completed, let's continue, he said to Ling Han. What? This meant that Ling Han had to continue heading to the enemy camp and carry out the mission. Wasn't this crazy? They had succeeded the first time, because the frenzied army had not expected Ling Han to be so daring. But there was no second chance. How could they succeed again? If they went again, they would be sending themselves to their deaths. Ling Han was also startled. He knew that Xian Qihu had been targeting him all along, but to oppress him so openly was still greatly out of his expectations. This was too shameless, wasn't it? After all, you are the greatest prodigy of all time. Can't you have some face? Everyone, don't you think that Ling Han is the best candidate to complete this mission? Xian Qihu suddenly said, raising his voice. Ask yourselves, if he falls into a tight encirclement, would he still have a chance to escape? But Ling Han could. He came back and scathed. For the big picture, Ling Han, don't you think you should put aside your selfishness? For the flames now plain, for the big picture, can you retreat? The last sentence was directed at Ling Han. End of this chapter. For a perfect anti-theft chapter, please search for the keyword, UU novel. You can read all kinds of novels. Chapter 29:18. Ling Han's expression was solemn. This was a top prodigy, and it was very possible that he was no weaker than Lin Yulian and the others. However, he was not well known. Is it because he's called white rice that he's so low-key? This introduction was indeed a bit degrading. A certain elite that could suppress the heavens was actually called white rice. Hee. White rice charged over, his palms flying. Boom, 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 boom. The winds and clouds surged, and it was incredibly terrifying. Thankfully, this was the intersection of the two realms, and part of it was even a void. Thus, there was no need to fear such destruction. Otherwise, if two people with battle prowess of level 5 battled, even a medium realm would be destroyed. The two of them exchanged a few blows. This was to test the level of each other's power. Brother Ling is indeed extraordinary, possessing battle prowess of level 5 at level 3. I am truly impressed, White Rice said sincerely. Although he wasn't famous, he was actually very proud. He didn't even care about Lin Yu Lian and Xian Chihu, who were the greatest prodigies of all eternity. He believed that he definitely wouldn't lose, but when facing Ling Han, he was extremely impressed. Ling Han was able to match him even though his cultivation level was lower. He was definitely the first person in history. You're not bad too. Ling Han nodded. There were really only a few people that could compare to this White Rice. White Rice smiled faintly. However, basic power is only one part of battle prowess. It cannot decide victory or defeat. What ultimate move do you have? Show it to me. Ling Han was very excited. He was very excited to see what ultimate move White Rice would use. White Rice's right hand shook, and a symbol lit up. He charged over again. His power soared, and it was at least 30 times stronger. He used a 6th-rate symbol right off the bat. How rich? Ling Han was even more curious. Was this a celestial venerable tier symbol that this guy had comprehended on his own? Or was it given to him by his seniors? He also used a 6th-rate symbol and clashed with White Rice. Both of them had battle prowess around the late stage of level 5, and the boost from the celestial venerable tier symbols was also about the same. Naturally, it was impossible to determine who was stronger. The intensity of their battle was astonishing. People like the Empress were not even qualified to participate. After fighting for a while longer, White Rice finally got serious. He used a sword technique, and as a cold light flashed, the sword chi cut through everything and destroyed everything. It was shockingly terrifying. Ling Han also unsheathed his divine demon sword, and neither of them seemed to be at a disadvantage. He was not in a hurry. After all, he was one level lower. A tie would definitely be more urgent. As expected, White Rice started to increase his power. He activated the other heavenly venerable symbols and increased his battle prowess. 40 times, 50 times, 60 times. The number of Empyrean symbols he grasped was astonishing, and the level was also getting higher and higher. Ling Han clicked his tongue in wonder. Just what kind of background did this fellow have? His foundation was truly astonishing. However, Ling Han wasn't inferior either. He also activated high-level heavenly venerable symbols to keep up with White Rice's battle prowess. In the end, White Rice used a rune. Instantly, a heaven-suppressing aura surged. It was as if he had suddenly become an invincible god. First-rate talisman. Ling Han was shocked. Fuck, what was going on now? Did everyone already have a first-class symbol? Boom! White Rice's sword swept over, and the sword ray cut through heaven and earth. It was incredibly terrifying. This was a slash that was enhanced by the power of a first-class symbol. Its might was too terrifying. Ling Han wasn't afraid. It wasn't like he didn't have any first-class symbols. In fact, he even had 2 complete sets of combination symbols. If he used them, then it would be truly frightening. Hong hong hong. The battle between the two great elites was earth-shattering. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many people. When they discovered that the person that Ling Han was fighting with was actually a very unfamiliar young man, they were all shocked. Who is this guy? He has the battle prowess of a level 4. He isn't inferior to those 3. But how did this kind of person appear out of nowhere? He also has a first-class symbol. Heavens, could he be the descendant of some level 7? Everyone was curious, but they kept asking each other. Actually, no one knew White Rice's true identity. Ling Han muttered in his heart. Don't say that this guy is someone from Madness, just like Meng Dong and the others. There were almost 100 people mixed in the fiery frost plain. and they had all advanced into the heavenly venerable tier. Every one of them should have grasped a heavenly venerable symbol. However, it would be too presumptuous to think that the other party was a remnant of madness based on this point alone. Furthermore, although Meng Dong and the others also had the ability to fight above their levels, they definitely weren't as exaggerated as White Rice. This guy's monstrous talent really didn't lose to Lin Yulian or Xianqihu. While thinking this, Ling Han didn't stop attacking. Instead, he attacked even more quickly. Good. White Rice was excited from the battle. Take another move from me. He was really excited from the battle. He didn't call Ling Han Brother Ling, nor did he refer to himself as I. As he howled, his right eye suddenly shone, projecting an illusory image that quickly turned into a world. This world was very small, but although it was small, it had all the essentials. There were mountains, rivers, seas, and lakes. However, it was barren and didn't give birth to any life. However, Ling Han frowned slightly. He felt a terrifying pressure. This world gave him an extremely realistic feeling. Go! White Rice shouted, and this world descended towards Ling Han. Boom! It was as if a world was really suppressing him. Ling Han came to a realization. This is the plane that you've stored in your body. That's right. White Rice didn't deny it, and directly nodded to admit it. However, I haven't cultivated it to the great success realm. Thus, I can only reflect about 10% of my power. This was too terrifying. Using a world to suppress an opponent was simply crushing. So the small world in one's body could be used like this. Even if it was only 10% of its power, it was still extremely shocking. It made Ling Han feel that he definitely didn't want to fight against it. Otherwise, he would be crushed into pieces. However, this was a spar. If he didn't dare to take this move, didn't that mean that he lost? He abandoned his sword. Boom! The 9 paths symbols all activated, and he punched out again. His combat strength was almost pushed to the limit. If he was stronger, he would have to use the 8 paths combination symbol. However, this was Ling Han's current trump card. Boom! As this world descended, Ling Han punched out repeatedly. Pung pung pung. With every punch, a crack would appear in this world. When it was about to land on Ling Han's head, it was already covered in cracks. Then, Ling Han threw out a punch to make up for it. Pung! This world finally collapsed, and endless energy surged. Hung! The entire camp shook. What a terrifying attack power. Ling Han was also a little out of breath. He had only thrown out a few thousand punches, but it was already strenuous for him. It could be seen how much pressure he was under. The surrounding people were in an uproar. Who would have thought that a 4th-step cultivator would be so ferocious? Who the hell was this guy? Chapter 29:19. Ling Han's expression was solemn. This was a top prodigy, and it was very possible that he was not weaker than Lin Yulian and the others. However, he was not well known. Is it because he is called White Rice that he is so low-key? This introduction was indeed a bit degrading. A certain elite that suppressed the heavens was actually called White Rice. Hee. White Rice charged over, his palms flying. Boom boom boom. The wind and clouds surged, and it was extremely terrifying. Thankfully, this was where the 2 realms intersected, and part of it was even a void. Thus, there was no need to fear such destruction. Otherwise, if 2 people with battle prowess of level 5 battled, even this realm would be destroyed. The 2 of them exchanged a few blows. This was to test the level of each other's power. Brother Ling is indeed extraordinary. You have battle prowess of level 5 at level 3. I really admire you, White Rice said sincerely. Though he was not famous, he was actually very proud. He did not even take Lin Yulian and Xianqihu, who were the greatest prodigies of all time, seriously. He thought that he would definitely not lose. However, when facing Ling Han, he was filled with admiration. Ling Han, who was 1 cultivation level lower than him, was definitely the first person in history to be able to match him. You are not bad too. Ling Han nodded. There were really only a few people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with this White Rice. White Rice smiled calmly. However, basic power is only one part of battle prowess. It cannot decide victory or defeat. What ultimate move do you have? Show it to me. Ling Han was very excited. He was really looking forward to what ultimate move White Rice would use. White Rice's right hand shook, and a symbol lit up. He charged over again. His power increased explosively, increasing by at least 30 times. A sixth-rate symbol in one hand. He was rich and overbearing. Ling Han was even better. This was a celestial venerable tier symbol that he had comprehended himself, and it was given to him by his seniors. He also used a sixth-rate symbol and clashed with White Rice. Both of them had battle prowess around the late stage of level 5, and the power of the celestial venerable tier symbols was about the same. Naturally, it was impossible to determine who was stronger. The intensity of their battle was shocking. People like the Empress did not even have the right to interfere. After fighting for a while, White Rice finally got serious. He used a set of sword techniques. A cold light flashed, and the sword chi cut through everything. It was frightening. Ling Han also unsheathed his divine demon sword, and neither of them seemed to be at a disadvantage. He was not in a hurry. After all, he was one level lower. A tie would definitely be more urgent. As expected, White Rice started to increase his power. He activated the other heavenly venerable symbols and increased his battle prowess. 40 times, 50 times, 60 times. The number of Empyrean symbols he grasped was astonishing, and the level was also getting higher and higher. Ling Han clicked his tongue in wonder. Just what kind of background did this fellow have? His background was truly shocking. However, Ling Han wasn't inferior either. He also activated high-level heavenly venerable runes, and was able to keep up with White Rice's battle prowess. In the end, White Rice used a rune. Instantly, a heaven-suppressing aura surged. It was as if he had suddenly become an invincible god. First-rate talisman. Ling Han was shocked. Fuck, what was going on now? Did everyone already have a first-class symbol? Boom! White Rice's sword swept over, and the sword ray sliced through heaven and earth. It was extremely terrifying. This was a slash that was enhanced by the power of a first-class symbol. Its might was too terrifying. Ling Han wasn't afraid. It wasn't like he didn't have any first-class symbols. In fact, he even had 2 complete sets of combination symbols. If he used them, then it would be truly frightening. Hong hong hong. The battle between the 2 great elites was earth-shattering. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many people. When they discovered that the person that Ling Han was fighting with was actually a very unfamiliar young man, they were all shocked. Who is this guy? He has battle prowess of a 5th step at the 4th step. He isn't inferior to those 3. But how did this kind of person appear out of nowhere? He also has a first-class symbol. Heavens, could he be the descendant of a certain 7th step? Everyone was curious, but they kept asking each other. Actually, no one knew White Rice's true identity. Ling Han mumbled internally. Don't say that this guy is someone from madness, just like Meng Dong and the others. There were almost 100 people mixed in the fiery frost plane, and they had all advanced into the heavenly venerable tier. Every one of them should have grasped the heavenly venerable symbol. However, it would be too presumptuous to think that the other party was a remnant of madness based on this. Furthermore, although Meng Dong and the others had a certain level of battle prowess, they definitely weren't as exaggerated as White Rice. This guy's monstrousness really didn't lose to people like Lin Yulian and Xian Chihu. With this thought in mind, Ling Han's attacks didn't stop at all. Instead, they became even faster. Good. White Rice was getting excited from the battle. Take another move from me. He was really excited from the battle. He didn't call Ling Han Brother Ling, nor did he refer to himself as I. Howling, his right eye suddenly shone, projecting an illusory image that quickly turned into a world. This world was very small, but although it was small, it had all the essentials. There were mountains, rivers, seas, and lakes. However, it was barren and didn't give birth to any life. However, Ling Han frowned slightly. He felt a terrifying pressure. This world gave him a feeling that it wasn't real. Go! White Rice shouted, and this world descended towards Ling Han. Hong! It was as if a world was really suppressing him. Ling Han came to a realization. This is the plane that you've stored in your body. That's right. White Rice didn't deny it. He nodded and admitted it. However, I haven't cultivated it to the great success realm. Thus, I can only reflect about 10% of my strength. This was too terrifying. Using a world to suppress one's opponent was simply crushing. So the small world in one's body could be used like this. Even if he only had 10% of his strength, it was still very shocking. It made Ling Han feel that he definitely didn't want to fight against it, or else he would be crushed into pieces. However, this was a spar. If he didn't dare to take this move, didn't that mean that he had lost? He abandoned his sword. Hong, all 9 symbols were activated. He punched out again, and his battle strength was almost pushed to the limit. If he was stronger, he would have to use the 8 combination symbols. However, this was Ling Han's current trump card. Hong. This world descended, and Ling Han punched out repeatedly. Pung pung pung. Every punch would cause a crack to appear in this world. When it was about to land on Ling Han's head, it was already covered in cracks. Ling Han punched out again. Pung, this world finally collapsed. Endless energy surged and Hong, the entire camp shook. What a terrifying attack strength. Ling Han was also slightly out of breath. He had only punched out a few thousand times, but it made him feel like it was strenuous. It could be seen how much pressure he was under. The surrounding people were also in an uproar. Who would have thought that a 4th-step cultivator, who suddenly appeared, would be so ferocious? Who is this guy? BK reading on my phone is more refreshing. Chapter 29-20. He could only say that Bai Fan was quite an amusing old man. He had given his son and grandson such weird names. Of course, Bai Fan's father was not simple. If he had not set a good example, there would not have been rising stars like Bai Qi and Bai Fan. Ling Han had always thought that he was bad at giving names, but there was always someone better than him. Today he was convinced. Alright, the joke is over. Let's go, Ling Han said solemnly. The 4 of them moved towards the frenzy campsite. Before long, they were close to the campsite. After suffering a loss once, the frenzy troop was no longer resting. Instead, some of the monsters were on sentry duty. They were all multi-eyed monsters, and they were emitting divine sense waves to scan the surrounding environment. These guards were only at step 4, but they were more than enough for sentry duty. Ling Han and the other 3 shook their bodies, and their auras changed immediately. They had disguised themselves as the frenzy troop, and their auras were similar as well. It was impossible to see through their disguises, but it would be different if they were scanned carefully. They would definitely be exposed. It did not matter. These monsters were not intelligent, and they were very crude. Ling Han's group of 4 strode into the campsite. The divine sense of those guards only swept past them once, and did not linger on them at all. They began to look for targets to snipe, and soon, they locked onto 3. To ensure that we succeed in one shot, Brother Bai and I will be in charge of 1 each. The other 1 will be given to Brother Xianfeng and Brother Fu. Ling Han assigned the tasks. We'll kill these 3 today. Alright. Bai Fan and the other 2 nodded. Bai Fan and Xianfeng did not ask Ling Han how they were going to break out of the encirclement, as they believed in Ling Han. The 4 of them took their positions, and they attacked at the same time. Ling Han used his full strength the moment he attacked. As the first tier symbols circulated, his power was boosted to more than 80 times. The power was unstoppable, and the leader monster's head had already exploded before it could even react. He immediately kept the corpse, and leaped towards the direction of the white rice. Bai Fan gave it his all, and his eyes glowed as he projected a world to suppress his target. But his target was surprisingly strong, and actually withstood this attack. Seeing that the surrounding monsters had opened their eyes, and were emitting boundless hostility, White Rice shouted again. Its left eye also opened wide, and it flew out of the second world. There are actually 2 planes in his body. This power was too great. The target monster released a miserable cry and struggled on its deathbed, releasing a spirit attack. White Rice let out a muffled grunt, but the suppression of the 2 worlds did not waver. Pung! The target monster was instantly crushed into pieces. This was the projection of 2 planes, and its power was terrifying. It immediately created a mushroom-sized shockwave that spread out in all directions. Pung pung pung! Countless members of the deranged army were sent flying. They had no time to attack, giving White Rice some time to recover. By the time the attack from further away arrived, Bai Mi had already neutralized the mental attack. He immediately turned around and charged towards Fu Yuan and Fu Yuan. The two of them were not as powerful as Ling Han and White Rice. Even though they used all their skills, they were not able to kill their target. They only managed to injure it. "Don't worry about it," Ling Han said as he charged over. "Prepare to retreat." The four of them charged in one direction. As long as they converged, Ling Han would be able to tear open the space and escape with the three of them. "Wishful thinking," one of the leaders said coldly. It commanded the army to attack fiercely, separating Ling Han and the others, not giving them a chance to converge. Ling Han let out a long cry. Even though White Rice and the others were monstrous, they could not withstand the combined attacks of over 10,000 fifth steps. He had to quickly bring them out. Pung pung pung. He activated the 9-stream combination talisman, and his momentum was unstoppable. "Brother White, follow me." He first converged with White Rice, and then charged toward Xianfeng and Fu Yuan. He and White Rice worked together, and their battle prowess was unparalleled. Just as they were about to reach Fu Yuan and Xianfeng, the situation suddenly changed. Fu Yuan and Xianfeng were actually separated. Ling Han could only charge toward Xianfeng, who was closer to him. After rescuing him, he charged towards Fu Yuan. The three of them worked together, and their momentum was unstoppable. However, Fu Yuan was also being forced back by the monsters, and the distance between them was slowly closing. "You guys leave first." Fu Yuan saw that Ling Han and the others were starting to get injured, and he immediately shouted. If Ling Han and the others left, he would definitely die. "We came together, and we'll leave together." Ling Han finally did not hold back anymore. He activated the 8-stream symbol, and instantly became unstoppable. With nearly 1,000 times his strength, how could a fifth step be his match? He brought Xianfeng and White Rice to attack Fu Yuan. He grabbed Fu Yuan, and without hesitation, he tore open the space and brought the three of them in. The four of them disappeared. Even if the frenzy army tore open the space, they would not be able to find them. Ling Han and the three of them traveled through the space and quickly returned to the fiery frost plain. "This is amazing," White Rice clapped and laughed. He knew that Ling Han was definitely proficient in some kind of escape technique. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape the frenzy army's camp the first time he entered. However, he did not expect it to be like this. "I really want to fight again," Xianfeng said, his face full of excitement. They had gone deep into the enemy's camp alone, and they were still able to leave in one piece. This was something worth remembering for the rest of their lives. Ling Han looked at White Rice. "You really hit it well. You actually have 2 small worlds in your body." White Rice scratched his head. "I didn't want to hide it. I wanted to use it when I was sparring with you, but you stopped me." Ling Han thought about it, and realized that was indeed the case. "How did you do it?" He was very curious because Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing had also taken this path, but they could only contain one small world. There was no need to think about it. The power of 2 planes was definitely stronger. He quickly replied, "If it's a secret, you don't have to force it." White Rice smiled. "It's not a big secret. I just need to make a move in the 7 steps and open up some space in my dantian to contain another small world." "Can it contain a 3rd or 4th small world?" Ling Han asked. "No." White Rice shook his head. "Even if it's just accommodating 2 planes, not everyone can do it. It's very easy for one to be sucked dry while the plane is growing. Furthermore, one might not even be able to pass the stage of quasi-heavenly venerable and explode from the power of 2 planes." Ling Han glanced at him and said, "You've said so much just to show off how awesome you are." "No way." White Rice looked very serious. "Of course not," Xianfeng said. "Beat him up." Ling Han attacked first. With the 3 of them working together, no matter how monstrous White Rice was, he could not withstand it. Very quickly he was beaten up. Chapter 29-21. The return of Ling Han's group of 4 to the camp naturally caused another uproar. Once might have been luck, but twice in a row, it was definitely not luck but strength. This time, Ling Han and the others killed another 2-liter monsters. Their achievements were outstanding, and even Xian Chi, who was too embarrassed to find fault with them. For the first time ever, he gave a few words of encouragement, but he still left a sentence for Ling Han to continue working hard. He couldn't be satisfied with just this, and had to continue to play his role. This meant that Ling Han's group had to continue to carry out the decapitation mission at the frenzy camp. Ling Han started to rest. He had broken into the enemy's camp twice in a row. Although he had escaped unscathed, his mind was still very tense, and he needed to relax. Also, he had to go into seclusion to make some deductions. He was very interested in Bai Rui's ability to use the dimension. Of course, this move could only be used by people who had integrated a small world into their body before step 1. Without a dimension in their body, what could they use to suppress it? Ling Han's body contained boundless existential plane power. Yet this was only the embryonic form. It would take a very, very long time for it to mature into a true plane. There was too much of it, and the amount of energy required for each step of growth was incredibly frightening. Originally, he was impartial and let these dimension power grow at a balanced rate. But now he planned to focus on nurturing 1 or 2 of them, so that they could evolve into a real world first. But there was a problem that had to be solved first. Right now, he was using cells as a vessel to nurture the endless dimension power. But to turn the dimension power into a real dimension, he needed to find a place to accommodate this dimension. Normally, a celestial venerable's body could accommodate a dimension, like Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing. But even step 7 could only make 1 more dimension in his body. Ling Han wanted to let 1 or 2 dimensions grow first. Was he supposed to let them enter his dantian? That was simple, but how would he solve the problem when countless dimensions grew in the future? Therefore, letting the dantian contain the dimensions was only a temporary measure, not a solution. Ling Han thought for a long time, and decided not to move the dimension power to another place. Instead, he would keep it in the same place. If he wanted to become an origin world, then he needed a strong ability to accommodate it. Each cell contained a plane, and the cell wall was the plane's barrier, overlapping and endless. This was only a theory, but it was not something that could be taken for granted. Ling Han went to look for Vale. When it came to theoretical things, this guy was still more proficient. After Vale heard this question, he didn't hesitate to ask for a price of 100,000 pieces of immortal gold from Ling Han. Then, he started to help Ling Han with his divination. Because it had been too long, Ling Han couldn't leave the Outer Realm battlefield for too long. So he returned first and returned after a while. He and White Rice's group of 4 went out a few more times. Even though the other party was well prepared, they still couldn't stop them from killing people. However, each time was more dangerous than the last. The 4 of them returned with injuries. However, being able to come back alive was a huge miracle. The 4 of them became more and more famous, attracting more people to join their team. However, Ling Han no longer accepted people. It wasn't that he was arrogant, but if there were too many people, he wouldn't be able to free up his hands to bring all of them back alive. After going through such dangers, Ling Han's cultivation advanced very quickly. He calculated that in less than 100 million years, he could reach the late stage of step 3 and steadily advance a level. After a few hundred years, the Frenzy Army finally launched a fierce attack. However, because of the decapitation operation, they lost many commanders, so the army couldn't display their strongest combat power. Even so, the Flame Frost Army also paid a huge price, and many people were injured or killed. Everyone was worried. If this continued, they might be forced to give up this stronghold very soon. Moreover, they wouldn't just retreat a little. They would have to retreat to the Flame Frost Plain and use the plane's suppression to resist the Frenzy Army. However, the consequence of this was that the Frenzy Army would take the opportunity to advance. In just a few 100 million years, they could turn this area into a passageway between the 2 worlds. If that happened, the Flame Frost Army would lose their advantage again. This was equivalent to drinking poison to quench thirst, a slow suicide. However, when that time came, they would have to take poison. Ling Han returned to the World No. 1 Martial Arts Institute to see what Wu Li would suggest. In the end, this guy was still calculating, so he could only leave. The battle didn't stop. Ling Han's group of 4 was still carrying out assassinations, but the Frenzy Army's defense was getting tighter and tighter. They couldn't successfully decapitate the leader no matter what. This was normal. If they had succeeded every time, how could this army have caused so much damage? After persisting for tens of thousands of years, their line of defense collapsed. They retreated 1,000 miles, and their lines of defense were lost one after another. In the end, they had to retreat from this area and use the Flame Frost Plains suppression to assist in the battle. This was a huge failure, but if they forced it, they would only be annihilated. The big shots had already made a decision to start building a second super high-level plane. Simply put, it was to speed up the progress of the planar war. They would clear out all the remaining high-level planes, and one of the planes would start devouring the other planes to create a second super high-level plane. Once the Flame Frost Plane was lost, they could still retreat and continue to fight against the Frenzy Army. Thus, the Flame Frost Plane was still struggling to resist, buying time for the new super high-level plane to appear. In the Flame Frost Plane, it was difficult for the Frenzy Army to advance. Under the suppression of the plane, the Frenzy Army's overall strength was weakened by a level. They could only exert the combat power of a 4-step, or a little more than that. The threat was naturally much smaller, giving the Flame Frost Army a lot of time to catch their breath. Taking advantage of this time, the Celestial Venerables hurried to recover, break through, and improve their strength. In the blink of an eye, 300 million years passed. The environment of the world changed dramatically. The frenzy had already devoured the plane, turning the world that originally belonged to the Flame Frost Plane into a place where the two planes met. The suppression on the Frenzy Army also disappeared. A war broke out. After accumulating power for hundreds of millions of years, the Frenzy Army became unstoppable, causing the line of defense to collapse 1,000 miles again. After giving up a large amount of territory, the Flame Frost Army stood firm and continued to defend here. At this speed, they might be able to hold on for 100 billion years. By then, most of the Flame Frost Plane would be devoured, and it would fall from a super high-level plane. If it was just a high-level plane, it would be completely insufficient to fight against the Frenzy Army. Moreover, the war between the 7-step Celestial Venerables would also cause great damage to the plane. It was tantamount to helping the Frenzy Army. 100 billion years was enough for a new super high-level plane to appear among the current high-level planes. A portion of the Celestial Venerables were transferred to the high-level planes to help, speeding up the planar war. Ling Han finally received news from Wally. This fellow had completed his divination. Chapter 29-22. You owe me 100 million immortal gold. That was the first thing Vari said. Ling Han looked at him and saw that this guy was extremely weak, as if he would be blown away by a gust of wind. This calculation is too much. At least half of my calculation units collapsed due to overloading, Vale said. Ling Han nodded. Fine. Not just 100 million. I can even get you 1 trillion. As long as the plane power in his body could evolve into a real plane, then immortal gold would be a piece of cake. Look at madness. It was just a plane, but it could create endless celestial venerables. If it could become a primary world, immortal gold would be a piece of cake. Vale stretched out his finger and pointed at Ling Han's forehead. Then it lit up and transmitted countless formulas and laws to Ling Han. Ling Han passively accepted it and compared it with his own comprehension, learning from each other's strengths to make up for his weaknesses. Vale, thank you so much, he said seriously. Don't think that you can get away with 100 million immortal gold just by saying that, Vale emphasized. Ling Han laughed loudly. Don't worry. I definitely won't. Oh right, this place might not be safe in the future. Go to the Xuanma Plain. It will become a super high-level plane in the future, and replace it with this place. Are you trying to send me away and go back on your word? Vale asked suspiciously. Ling Han shook his head. The most important thing between people is trust. Alright, leave quickly. This place is getting more and more dangerous. Because there was already a plan to give up the Frost Plain. The retreat was already underway. Also, the Xuanma Plain would become a super high-level plain in the future. Right now it was empty. All the forces had to settle in and divide the territory. Thus, they had to send people there as soon as possible. Ling Han started to cultivate in seclusion. Although the front line was important, it didn't matter if he was gone in this situation. With the suppression of the plain power, the Frost Army had the absolute advantage. They just had to give up some territory from time to time. Back then, he used his cells to nurture the plain power, because he thought that one day he could evolve this power into a real plane. Then, he would be a second primary world with endless combat power. But how could a single cell contain a plane? This would require Vari's help. To sum it up, it was very simple. Ling Han had constructed his own rules of space, allowing his cells to grow infinitely large. Just like how a mustard seed could contain a mountain, it was not impossible for a cell to contain a plane. However, while the conclusion was simple, the process was extremely complicated. Ling Han combined Watt's plan, but more of it was based on his own understanding. Calculations were Wally's specialty. He stood at a higher position and used Wally's calculations to verify his own ideas. He was the real decision-maker and promoter. This was a long process, but Ling Han had plenty of patience. For someone like Ling Shi, nurturing a plane in her dantian was a simple matter. Even if it was like white rice that needed to contain two planes at the same time, that would be taken care of by a 7-step powerhouse. And she only needed to nourish it. Ling Han was different. He nurtured a plane in a cell, so there was no place for him to use as a reference. Only Vari's calculations could help. Ling Han gave many possibilities, and Vari eliminated the completely impossible ones to reduce Ling Han's workload. He sat quietly, and the celestial venerable symbols in his body all lit up, communicating with heaven and earth, extracting two kinds of intrinsic particles to nourish his body. In the past, all the energy would be evenly distributed by the cells in his body, and the two kinds of intrinsic energy also needed to be strengthened. There were too many people crying piteously for food, which made Ling Han's cultivation progress shockingly slow. Now, Ling Han was fully nourishing the two cells in his body. This was fast. How many celestial venerable symbols did he have? More than 200. Not only were there first-rate symbols, but he also had all the symbols of the 8th and 9th streams. Under the resonance, how many times could his cultivation speed increase? One had to know that this wasn't a battle, where only one symbol or a group of symbols could take effect. But how many symbols could take effect? How many times did this increase his cultivation speed in total? 1,362 times. Such a terrifying cultivation speed was all added to the two cells, nourishing the two planes. What kind of concept was that? Only 20,000 years had passed, and in these two cells, the plane power had grown vigorously, each turning into a small world. How small was it? It was the same size as the small world that Ling Han had implanted into Ling Shi's body. Ling Han revealed a smile, not because of the growth of these two planes, but because of the formation of the planes. From plane power to a real plane, this step was too shocking. It had never been seen since ancient times, and perhaps it would never happen again in the future. However, this was just the beginning. Ling Han took the second step toward becoming the strongest in all of eternity. He began to strengthen these two planes. Time passed quickly, and soon another 900,000 years had passed. These two planes had reached the level of a middle-level plane. There was no way to go further. Ling Han himself was only at the third step, and his physique had a limit. Ling Han flipped his right hand, and a plane projection blasted out. The space trembled, and it was extremely terrifying. "It's not as good as white rice," he said softly. This was normal. White rice was at the fourth step, and this was the advantage of realms. There was no other way. If the quality is not good enough, then I will make up for it with quantity. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion, and he continued to cultivate the third and fourth planes. Another 900,000 years passed, and he cultivated these two planes to the peak of his current realm. He sensed and found that after nurturing 4 planes in his body, it created a lot of pressure on his physique. There was a limit to this. After reaching this limit, nurturing a new plane would be an act of courting death. However, for was far from his limit. Ling Han went into seclusion again. Another 8 million years later, he transformed a total of 13 plane power into planes and pushed them to the level of a middle-level plane. This was his current limit. Now, what level can my combat strength reach? Ling Han tore open the space and entered the void. If he carried out the trial here, it would really not cause any impact. With a thought, the 13 planes in his body projected out at the same time, turning into 13 plane shadows, emitting an extremely terrifying pressure. Go! He shouted softly, and pushed the 13 plane projections out. He blasted a hole in the energy storm in the void. Very awesome! Ling Han himself was shocked. With the addition of the 8th-rate combination talisman, can I even fight a 6-step expert? He quickly shook his head. It should still be a little lacking. However, what if I throw caution to the wind and really throw all 13 planes out? Although these were only middle-level planes, if all 13 planes were thrown out, what kind of concept was that? Chapter 29-24. The terrifying thing about a plane was its size. A single plane was enough to pin down thousands of celestial venerables of the same level at the same time. Otherwise, how could Ling Han single-handedly kill the enemy leader in the midst of an army of 10,000? Not to mention him, even Lin Yulian and Xanchu couldn't do it. I only have 13 planes. What if I could have 130, or 1,300? Ling Han thought, and couldn't help but look forward to it. At that time, even if he fell into the frenzy army's encirclement, he wouldn't need to escape into the void. He just needed to release a plane projection, and these monsters could only be suppressed. If the projection was like this, what about the plane itself? How many times more powerful would it be? This couldn't be easily tried, because if the projection was destroyed, then so be it. It would only take a few months or a few years before it could be used again. But the plane was different. This was the foundation, and if the foundation was gone, there would be a second time. So, this is my trump card, and I won't use it unless I have no other choice. Ling Han said in his heart. On the other hand, I have to increase my cultivation as soon as possible, and increase the upper limit of the plane. He was about to tear open the void and return, but he suddenly felt an extremely uneasy feeling. Whoosh, in the void, he saw a whip shadow lashing over. It was Frenzy. This still wasn't Frenzy's main body, but it gave Ling Han an incomparably real feeling, oppressing him to the point that it was difficult to breathe. He suddenly had a feeling that this was Frenzy using the plane's power to oppress him. One had to know that Frenzy wasn't only the strongest in the world, but also a plane. If Ling Han could use plane projection to oppress people, why couldn't Frenzy? Not only could it, but it could even do it better than Ling Han. 100 times, 1,000 times better. The two weren't on the same level at all. Although it looked like a whip shadow lashing over, there was a plane projection within it, which was equivalent to a super high-level plane suppressing him. What kind of concept was this? Although Frenzy had attacked him in the past, it actually didn't carry any killing intent, and its purpose was just to awaken him. But this attack was completely different, and it was meant to kill him. Obviously, Frenzy had no intention of saving him. Since he had betrayed him, then he wouldn't hesitate to erase him. When the #1 expert in the world made a move, even if it was just a clone, who could stop it? At least 6 steps. Wung wung wung. The 13 planes in his body all shot out, forming a shield in front of him. The planar projection was able to affect even 5th-step experts. But now, not only had 13 planar projections appeared, but they were also planar projections. Their power had increased by at least 10 times, and the shield they formed should be impregnable. Pung pung pung. However, this wild attack instantly caused the 13 planes to explode, but it only managed to delay them for a brief moment. This bought a moment for Ling Han, but it also caused him to vomit blood. The plane collapsed, and he, as the main body, was naturally affected. However, he did not stop. He used this moment to tear open the space and return to the original world. Wah! He began to vomit large mouthfuls of blood. His complexion instantly became incomparably pale. He He lay on the ground, not wanting to move at all. The plane that he had painstakingly nurtured had been destroyed. This was too painful. He looked inside his body. Fortunately, although the plane had been destroyed, there was still a trace of remnant power left. This could still allow him to slowly nurture the plane again. However, he would have to start from the beginning again. His thousands of years of hard work had been completely wasted. Damn it! Ling Han sat cross-legged and took out a great medicine. This was a restorative medicine. Crunch. He took a bite, trying to recover as quickly as possible. After a full 3 years, he finally recovered a little. He stopped and began to think. How did frenzy find me? I've already erased the imprint it left in my body. If it could still find me, why didn't it appear after traveling through the void so many times? This time, it's such a coincidence. It's practically ambushing me in the void. Could it be that someone leaked the secret? Ling Han was shocked. If that was not the case, how could there be such a coincidence? But who leaked the secret? One had to know that there were still over 100 spies in the fiery frost plain. Could it be one of them? However, not many people knew that he was going to battle this time. Aside from the Empress and her daughters, the Rain Emperor, the Black Donkey, and the Heavenly Venerate knew, as well as his comrades like White Rice, Fu Yuan and Xian Feng. Then there were the 3 main commanders, Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang. If Ling Han wanted to do something on the battlefield, he definitely had to report it. If there were spies, then they were among these people. Ling Han immediately eliminated the Empress, the Black Donkey and the others. They had come all the way with him, and he had absolute trust in them. Then they were among White Rice, Fu Yuan Xianfeng, Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu and Wu Haoyang. However, Lin Yulian, the 3 greatest prides of eternity, and White Rice were all descendants of 7 steps. So the possibility of them becoming frenzy subordinates was close to 0. Of course, he could not eliminate the possibility that Xian Chihu had colluded with frenzy to eliminate Ling Han. Thus, the most likely suspects were these 3, Xian Chihu, Fu Yuan and Xianfeng. Ling Han did not want to suspect his comrades, so he was more inclined to believe that Xian Chihu had leaked the secret. In order to kill me, this person is really willing to do anything, even disregarding his bottom line, Ling Han thought. He continued to recover from his injuries, and after another few dozen years, he finally recovered. However, the destroyed dimension needed to be nurtured anew, and this was tens of millions of years of hard cultivation. He returned to the foreign battlefield, and before he could tell them what had happened, he received a huge piece of news. That group of lost ancient dimensions had changed. The Empress and the others had not left, and were waiting for Ling Han to return. What happened? Ling Han asked. We are not clear, either, but it is said to be very shocking. Let's go take a look. Ling Han and the others also set out. Only a dozen or so years later, they once again came to this group of lost dimensions. There seems to be no change. Ling Han's eyes swept over. This place was still the same, but because the mines had been excavated, countless ruins were left, and it was a scene of desolation. Just as he finished saying this, a pillar of light rose from afar, breaking through the plane barrier, and causing the void to explode. Ling Han was instantly shocked. The energy in this pillar of light is too terrifying, at least reaching 6 steps. Could it be that this is an energy storm that rushed out from the 9th or 10th layer planes? Hunyo asked, tilting her head. Is that possible? The Empress nodded. Now that the ground here has been excavated, many tunnels have been formed, and it is not strange that an energy storm could pass through. Wang, a terrifying aura swept over, spreading for hundreds of millions of miles. It was more refreshing to read on a phone. Chapter 29-25. Ling Han, the Empress, and Hunyo all felt a tightness in their chests, and almost lost control of their power and fell from the sky. The 3 of them were all shocked. What a terrifying aura, that could actually have such a terrifying effect on them. However, this aura only swept by for a moment before disappearing. Is this an anomaly? This aura is too terrifying. It's at least at the 6th step, but this is clearly a land of death. So where did a sixth-step elite come from? Don't tell me there's a living sixth-step elite buried underneath. Ling Han thought for a moment, shook his head and said, "That's not very possible. Senior Zhou and the others have already explored the 9th level, and all the raw stone veins should have been swept clean. It's impossible that there are any left. If there's a sixth-step elite hiding in the 10th level, even Senior Zhou and the others can't pass through, then how could they have spread their aura out?" The three of them looked at each other and had a bold guess. Don't tell me there's still a 7th-step elite sleeping here, and now he's about to wake up. If this was true, then it would really be a big deal. 7th step was the strongest in the world, and they were indestructible and indestructible, although one died, and they didn't know how he was killed. If there really was a 7th step, then if he did evil, the entire origin world would suffer. They observed here, and found that after 67 days, the aura from before appeared again, and it was extremely terrifying. However, the next time, it was only 66 days before this aura appeared again. Then 65 days, 64 days, 63 days. The interval was getting shorter and shorter, which made Ling Han and the others even more uneasy. If this was an elite sleeping, then now the aura was getting more and more active, and the time of his awakening should be getting closer and closer. They went deep into the 8th level, and observed from a close distance, but still could only feel the vastness and majesty of this aura, but still couldn't find the source. After a few days, they saw Zhou Heng and 3 other 6th-step celestial venerables coming out from the 9th level. "Senior Zhou." Ling Han hurriedly went up to greet them. "Did you discover anything?" "The source comes from the 10th level, or even a lower level," Zhou Heng said solemnly. "There's a high possibility that a 7th-step expert is buried here. A living 7th-step expert. Previously, when he had opened the ore, he had also obtained a 7 steps cultivator, but that was a corpse. Now he had obtained a living 7 steps cultivator, so the meaning behind it was completely different. "Brother Zhou, should we ask your master to come?" asked a 6th-step expert to the side. He was Rong Tianyu, Lin Xiaoyang, and Zhou Heng's ally. Zhou Heng nodded. "This matter is too important. Even if master doesn't come personally, he should at least send a clone." No one felt that this was exaggerated. It was too shocking that a new 7th-step expert had appeared. More and more people came. Even Zhou Heng and the other 6th-steps started to make arrangements and set up a formation here. If the newly emerged 7th-step cultivator had evil intentions, they would have to suppress him. Even if they couldn't kill him, they would have to seal him here forever. 6 steps was impossible. Therefore Lin Luo, Bai Fan, Xian Fu, and the rest of the 7 steps each sent out a clone. Almost all the celestial venerables in the primordial world had gathered their powers. Frenzy forget it for now. Under the plane's suppression, as long as a small number of troops remained, they would be able to resist. This place was too important. On the 13th day, on the 12th day, that aura appeared more and more frequently. In the end, it appeared several times in a single day. The ground began to tremble, as if all the planes were about to collapse. A 7th-step expert had such power. "It's about to appear," Zhou Heng muttered, his brows furrowed. Although there were as many as 76-step experts here, and at least 5 7th-step experts clones, they might not be able to suppress a true 7th-step expert. No one was certain. A 7th-step expert was too powerful. After fusing 6 types of intrinsic powers, he was absolutely invincible. Only a 7th-step expert could contend against a 7th-step expert. This was an ironclad rule. Bang, bang, bang. When this aura moved like a normal person's breathing, a drum-like sound rang out, causing everyone's ears to hurt. Some people even started to bleed from their 7 orifices. One had to know that this was the 8th plane. Those who could come here were all at least 5th-step experts. Even such experts had been shaken to the point where they bled from their 7 orifices, just because of a sound. It was too terrifying. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 5 figures appeared, their bodies emitting boundless light. It was impossible to see their appearances clearly. However, once they appeared, the sound of the drum immediately quieted down and could no longer cause any impact. These were the clones of the 5 7th-step experts. Ling Han rubbed his nose. He was not bleeding from his 7 orifices, but he could not help but have a nosebleed. He could not help but be astonished. Even 7-step experts had been mobilized. Then a 7-step supreme was really about to appear. Would this lost ancient plane's countless years of secrets be unraveled because of this? Bang! A pillar of light shot into the sky, and a terrifying aura instantly surged like a tide. The 5 7-step experts all took a few steps back, showing signs of being defeated. Could it be that this 7th-step expert, who had yet to appear, was so powerful? Of course not, because these 5 supreme experts were only clones. No matter how powerful a clone was, how could it compare to the original body? Ah! A long sigh rang out in everyone's sea of consciousness. A long dream, ages pass. The mortal world returns, the era is like a dream. A figure slowly walked out from underground, calm and composed. However, when he appeared at the center of the crowd, no one could see his true appearance. His entire body was enveloped in boundless light, and even the vision of a 6th-step expert could not see through it. What? You've brought out such a large force. Do you want to eliminate me? That person swept his gaze around and couldn't help but laugh loudly. His voice was like thunder, causing many people to stagger and be unable to stand steadily. This was a 7th-step supreme, too powerful. Just a laugh had such might. If he really attacked, how could a 6th-step expert withstand it? How should I address you? Asked a clone of a 7th-step expert. He did not know who this person was. Right now, the 6th-step expert did not have the qualifications to speak, and could only be a spectator at the side. I am. The newly born 7th-step expert laughed. He stretched out his hands, drawing upon the essence of heaven and earth. A smile appeared on his face. As expected, the void is not destroyed, and life is born from death. Sir, what exactly are your origins? Asked another clone of a 7th-step expert. Oh, if I don't tell you, are you going to force me? Laughed the newly emerged 7 steps. He didn't seem to mind at all. 7 steps, undying and indestructible. Even if he faced frenzy, he would not need to be afraid. Who would he need to give face to? Old friends, wake up. He shouted and slammed his palm against the ground. Rumble. It wasn't just this plane that was trembling. The 7th and 6th planes were also trembling. Furthermore, the tremors continued upward, and then downward. Soon the 9th, the 10th, and even further downward. In just a moment, 4 incomparably terrifying auras rose up. R. Chapter 29-26. The terrifying thing about a plane was its size. A single plane was enough to pin down tens of millions of celestial venerables of the same level at the same time. Otherwise, how could Ling Han single-handedly kill the enemy's leader in the midst of an army of 10,000? Not to mention him. Even Lin Yulian and Xanchu couldn't do it. I only have 13 planes. What if I could have 130, or 1,300? Ling Han thought, and couldn't help but be fascinated. At that time, he would fall into the frenzy army's encirclement. He wouldn't need to escape into the void. He just needed to release a plane projection. And these monsters could only be suppressed. If the projection was like this, what about the plane itself? How many times more powerful would it be? This couldn't be easily tried, because if the projection was destroyed, it would take a few months or a few years before it could be used again. But the plane was different. This was the foundation, and if the foundation was gone, there would be a second time. So, this is my trump card, and I won't use it unless I have no other choice. Ling Han said in his heart. On the other hand, I have to improve my cultivation as soon as possible, and raise the limit of the plane I can accommodate. He was about to tear open the void and return, but he suddenly felt an extreme sense of unease. Whoosh in the void, he saw a whip shadow lashing over. It was Frenzy. This still wasn't Frenzy's main body, but it gave Ling Han an unreal feeling, oppressing him so much that he had difficulty breathing. He suddenly had a feeling that this was Frenzy using the plane power to oppress him. One had to know that Frenzy wasn't only the strongest in the world, but also a plane. If Ling Han could use plane projection to oppress people, why couldn't Frenzy? Not only could it, but it could even do better than Ling Han, 100 times, 1,000 times better. The two weren't on the same level at all. Although it looked like a whip shadow lashing over, it had a plane projection, which was equivalent to a super high-level plane suppressing him. What kind of concept was this? Although frenzy had attacked him in the past, it actually didn't have killing intent, and the goal was just to awaken him. But this attack was completely different, and it was to kill him. Obviously, Frenzy didn't have the idea of saving him. Since he had betrayed him, then he wouldn't hesitate to erase him. When the strongest in the world attacked, even if it was just a clone, who could stop it? At least 6 steps. Wung wung wung. The 13 planes in his body all shot out, forming a shield in front of him. Planar projections could even affect 5th step experts. But now, not only had 13 planar projections appeared, but they were also planar projections themselves. Their power had increased by at least 10 times, and the shield they formed should be impregnable. Pung pung pung. However, this wild attack instantly caused the 13 planes to explode, but it only managed to delay them for a brief moment. This bought a moment for Ling Han, but it also caused him to vomit blood and the plane to collapse. As the main body, he was naturally affected, but he did not stop. He used this moment to tear open the space and return to the original world. Wah! He began to vomit large mouthfuls of blood, and his face instantly became pale. He lay on the ground, not wanting to move at all. The plane that he had painstakingly nurtured was destroyed. This was too hurtful. He looked inside his body. Fortunately, although the plane had been destroyed, there was still a trace of remnant power left. This could allow him to slowly nurture the plane again, but he would have to start from the beginning again. His thousands of years of hard work had been completely wasted. Damn it! Ling Han sat cross-legged and took out a great medicine. This was a restorative medicine. Crunch! He took a bite, trying to recover as quickly as possible. After a whole 3 years, he finally recovered a little. He stopped and began to think. How did Frenzy find me? I've already erased the imprint it left in my body. If it could still find me, why didn't it appear after so many times of traveling through the void? This time, it's such a coincidence. It's practically ambushing me in the void. Could it be that someone leaked the secret? Ling Han was shocked. If that wasn't the case, how could there be such a coincidence? But who leaked the secret? One had to know that there were still over 100 spies in the fiery frost plane. Could it be one of them? However, not many people knew that he was going to battle this time. Aside from the Empress and her daughters, the Rain Emperor, the Black Donkey, and the Heavenly Venerable of origin and birth knew, as well as his comrades like White Rice, Fu Yuan and Xian Feng. Then there were the 3 main commanders, Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang. If Ling Han wanted to do something on the battlefield, he definitely had to report it. If there were spies, then the problem was with these people. Ling Han immediately ruled out the Empress, the Black Donkey, and the others. They had come all the way with him, and he had absolute trust in them. That was with White Rice, Fu Yuan, Xian Feng, Lin Yulian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang. However, Lin Yulian, the 3 greatest prides of eternity, and White Rice were all descendants of 7 steps, so the possibility of them becoming Frenzy's subordinates was close to 0. Of course, he could not rule out the possibility that Xian Chihu had colluded with Frenzy to eliminate Ling Han. Thus, the most likely suspects were these 3: Xian Chihu, Fu Yuan, and Xian Feng. Ling Han did not want to suspect his own comrades, so he was more inclined to believe that Xian Chihu had leaked the secret. In order to kill me, this person is really willing to go to any lengths, and can even disregard his bottom line, Ling Han thought. He continued to recover from his injuries, and after another few dozen years, he finally recovered. However, the destroyed dimension needed to be nurtured anew, and this would require tens of millions of years of hard cultivation. He returned to the foreign battlefield, and before he could even tell them about his own matters, he received an earth-shattering piece of news. That group of lost ancient dimensions had undergone a change. The Empress and the others had not left yet, and were waiting for Ling Han to return. What happened? Ling Han asked. We are not sure, either, but it is said to be very astonishing. Let's go take a look. Ling Han and the others were also on their way. A mere dozen or so years later, They had once again arrived at this group of lost dimensions. There doesn't seem to be any changes. Ling Han's eyes swept over. This place was still the same, but because the mines had been excavated, countless ruins were left behind, and it was a scene of desolation. Peng He had just finished saying this when he saw a pillar of light rise from afar, breaking through the dimensional barrier and causing the void to explode. Ling Han was instantly shocked. The energy of this pillar of light is too terrifying, at least reaching 6 steps. Could it be that this is an energy storm that rushed out from the 9th or 10th layer planes? Hunyo asked, tilting her head. Is that possible? The Empress nodded. Now that the ground here has been excavated, many tunnels have been formed, and it is not rare for an energy storm to pass through. Wang, a terrifying aura swept over, spreading for millions and millions of miles. Audiobook 2929967, it was more refreshing to read on one's phone. Chapter 2928. There was actually another world before their world. If it wasn't for the tens of thousands of newly born immortal kings, everyone would think that they were dreaming. Follow me, Zhou Heng said to Feng Wuding and the other immortal kings from the previous origin world. No, it's better to come with me. Another 6-step expert stood up. Go to me. I will use endless resources to nurture you. Could it be that my side is lacking? Asked another 6-step expert. What was the most important thing in this world? Top experts and newcomers with endless potential. These tens of thousands of people came from the previous origin world. To be chosen, all of them were geniuses among geniuses. Not all of them could reach the 7th step, but reaching the 5th step shouldn't be a problem. Especially Feng Wuding. He was the strongest genius of the previous origin world, and had even obtained the inheritance of the origin world. In the future, he might even surpass the 7th step. How important was this? Any force that could obtain these geniuses would definitely become the strongest force in the entire origin world in the future. Therefore, even the 6th-step experts didn't care and jumped out to snatch these people. One after another, the 6th-step experts showed their sincerity and extended their olive branches. This caused the other immortal kings to be moved. A 6th-step expert, regardless of whether it was in this world or the previous one, they were already close to the peak. Hence they all made their choice. However, the most eye-catching Feng Wuding still didn't say anything. It wasn't that no one invited him. On the contrary, an ancient heaven's pride like him was naturally being fought over. However, he maintained his stance and didn't make a choice easily. Obviously, he was waiting for the best offer and wanted to see which side had better conditions. However, Lin Xiaoyang, Zhou Heng, and Chu Hao didn't participate in this fight. Although a force needed fresh blood, this wasn't suitable for a 7th-step force. Because a 7th-step force would never have to worry about withering one day. For example, Lin Luo could oversee the ancient world. Even if the origin world was destroyed, he would most likely continue to live. Why would he need fresh blood? Moreover, Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and even Lin Yulian could cultivate to the 7th step. This sect was too glorious, and didn't need to waste so much effort. In the end, Feng Wuding joined Yu Borong's World Alliance. Ling Han was taken aback. Yu Borong had a grudge with him for killing his son. Would Feng Wuding meet him in the future? He couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. He really wanted to see just how strong this son of Destiny's combat strength was. After dividing up the people, all the heavenly venerables returned to the extraterritorial battlefield to deal with the frenzy. Ling Han returned to his daily routine. If he wasn't cultivating, he would be fighting on the battlefield. He had the intention to carry out another operation to find out who was the spy by his side. But he didn't dare to take the risk. What if he was ambushed by frenzy this time? He couldn't guarantee that he would be able to escape. However, as long as he didn't find the spy, he wouldn't be able to rest easy, because they had just returned to the Fire Frost dimension. With the suppression of the dimension's power, they should be able to get about 200 to 300 million years of breathing space. Everyone made use of this time to cultivate. The prodigies of the previous generation of the origin world were indeed extraordinary. After just over 10 million years, over 1,000 heavenly venerables had emerged from among them, But what was unexpected was that Feng Wuding was actually only a pseudo-heavenly venerable. This strongest prodigy was blessed by the heavens, and he had gained the upper hand in the past, so why couldn't he? After Ling Han learned of this, he said, "In my opinion, this is what's terrifying about Feng Wuding. For a prodigy like him, becoming a heavenly venerable isn't difficult. What's difficult is how to become the strongest heavenly venerable." "You mean that he hasn't advanced into the heavenly venerable tier, and is doing some kind of accumulation?" the Empress asked. Ling Han nodded. "That should be the case. Now, I'm really looking forward to meeting him and seeing how strong he is." Another tens of millions of years passed, and the prodigies of the previous generation of the origin world became heavenly venerables one after another. They could be selected, and their aptitude was top-notch. Added with the accumulation of countless epochs, it wasn't strange for them to soar into the sky in one go. Moreover, the various great forces nurtured them at all costs. Previously, they had obtained many great herbs from opening the origin stones, and some had indeed been used, but even more had been preserved. Now many of them were being used on them. Merely 200 million years had passed, and the most ferocious prodigy had already advanced 3 steps. Moreover, the aftereffects didn't diminish, which was astounding. At this time, Feng Wuding finally broke through and took a step forward. And after he took a step forward, he challenged a 3rd-step heavenly venerable, and the result was a draw. When this news spread, the whole world was in an uproar. He was too strong, able to challenge someone 2 cultivation levels above him. Even Lin Yulian and Xan Chihu had to concede defeat. It seems like Ling Han can do it as well. Someone mentioned Ling Han. Humph, how can Ling Han compare to Feng Wuding? Not only is Feng Wuding the strongest prodigy of the previous generation of the origin world, but he has also obtained the inheritance of the origin world. He's already so strong when he has just advanced into the heavenly venerable tier, and he will definitely become even stronger in the future. That's right, the inheritor of the origin world, the son of destiny. His future achievements will definitely not be limited to the 7th step, and will definitely be even stronger. In everyone's eyes, Ling Han was inferior to Feng Wuding, and this was decided by chance. When the news reached Ling Han's ears, he only smiled faintly. He would not bully the weak. If Feng Wuding could catch up to him in cultivation level, then he wouldn't mind having a spar with the latter. And when Feng Wuding found out, he snorted disdainfully. "Oh, there's actually someone who can challenge someone 2 cultivation levels above him." He smiled and said, "When I advance 3 steps, I'll take him as my servant." These words were filled with disdain towards Ling Han, and were also vividly described by a servant. Very soon the news spread in the foreign battlefield. Hunyo was so angry that she shouted, and wanted to find that Feng Wuding, and give him a good thrashing. However, Feng Wuding was currently cultivating somewhere else, and she couldn't find him at all. Not only Feng Wuding, but in fact all the prodigies that had come from the previous generation of the origin world were also extremely proud, and looked down on the prodigies of this generation. Though there hadn't been any major conflict between the 2 sides, there were endless small conflicts. One day, these small conflicts would become a major conflict. Another 100 million years later, Feng Wuding exploded with terrifying potential, and caught up from behind. Not only did he advance 3 steps, he was only a hair's breadth away from the 4th step. And he too had finally arrived at the foreign battlefield. When they received this news, the whole campsite was in an uproar. One was the most prodigy of the previous generation of the origin world, while the other was an invincible freak of this generation. Now that they had finally met who was stronger, everyone was filled with anticipation towards this battle. End of this chapter. Chapter 29-29. Although Ling Han was hated by many, everyone had to admit that he was extremely freakish. He possessed the battle prowess of a 5th-level elite when he was only at the 3rd step, and he could move about freely in the chaotic barracks, killing countless enemies. Feng Wuding was a prodigy from the previous origin world, and he had even obtained the inheritance of that origin world. Although no one knew what this so-called inheritance was, Feng Wuding was definitely extremely powerful. He could rival a 5th-level elite when he was only at the 3rd step, which was enough to prove that he was no weaker than Ling Han. Previously, the two of them were already in a state of mutual hostility, provoking each other from afar. It was likely that the first thing Feng Wuding did after arriving at the foreign battlefield was to challenge Ling Han, to prove that he was the strongest prodigy in history. Unexpectedly, although Feng Wuding had already been at the barracks for 3 days, he had no intention of challenging Ling Han. This caused everyone to be dumbfounded. What was going on? However, someone guessed Feng Wuding's thoughts and said, "This must be Feng Wuding's doing this on purpose. He doesn't take Ling Han seriously, and he disdains to challenge him." Was that really the case? Ling Han, that brat looks down on you so much, and you can tolerate this? The large black dog ran over to look for Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "So what? I'll go and challenge him." "Of course." The large black dog nodded and said, "That brat is so arrogant, so how can I not teach him a lesson?" Ling Han shook his head and said, "He's doing this on purpose. He wants to raise his status, so why should I help him?" The large black dog thought about it and agreed. Ling Han's reputation had been forged through battles, and it had already been publicly acknowledged by everyone. Meanwhile, although Feng Wuding's starting point was very high, he didn't have any astonishing battle achievements after all. If Ling Han went to challenge him first, then he would be able to make use of this opportunity to increase his reputation by a large margin. So shameless. He actually wants to use my little Han to raise his status like this. No, Grandpa Dog is going to curse them. The large black dog ran away angrily. The two great geniuses hadn't fought, but there were many small conflicts between the Ling Alliance and the World Alliance. No matter if it was in the foreign battlefields or the Xuanma Plain, there had already been a few battles between the two sides, with both sides winning and losing. Feng Wuding was really able to keep his composure. He didn't make a move at all and maintained his posture. However, the conflict between the two forces became more and more intense. Not only did the frequency of the conflict increase, but the number of people involved also increased. It was only after one incident that Ling Han was finally enraged. Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing weren't in the extraterritorial battlefield. The husband and wife were in charge of expanding the territory of the Xuanma Plain. However, they were ambushed by the World Alliance, which caused them to suffer heavy injuries and almost didn't make it back. Family and friends were Ling Han's reverse scale. Previously, he had been willing to say anything and treated this conflict as a form of training for everyone. But now the World Alliance had gone overboard. Ling Han. The Empress and Hunyo both looked towards Ling Han. "Let's go." Ling Han stood up with a sullen face. "Where are you going?" "Heaven Alliance." The three of them walked out of the house and headed in the direction of the World Alliance. Though this was the extraterritorial battlefield, the various forces still divided their territories. You were here, I was there, and they usually minded their own business. If anyone rashly intruded into the territory of another force, they would be banished at best, and even beaten to a pulp at worst. There was nothing to be done. Previously, in order to fight for the heavenly venerable symbols, the great heavenly venerables had already formed an irreparable estrangement between each other. How could they be as close as brothers just because they fought side by side? Now, though almost 90% of the heavenly venerables were gathered here, it was quiet below the city walls. Most people were cultivating in their houses, striving to become just that little bit stronger in the next wave of attack from the Frenzy Army. Perhaps it was because they were just that little bit stronger that they would be able to survive. The city walls were very long, but under the feet of the heavenly venerables, it was only a matter of a while. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, they had already reached the territory of the World Alliance. Ling Han stopped and didn't continue forward. He turned around. On one side of the city walls was a very large group of buildings. This was the territory that the World Alliance had divided. Ling Han strode forward, heading towards the cluster of buildings. "Stop right there!" Someone immediately shouted. If they were walking along the city walls, no one would care. However, it was different here. This was already the territory that the World Alliance had drawn out. Ling Han looked over. Ugh! That person immediately covered his chest with one hand. Blood was flowing out of his 7 orifices. This was only a 9th-level heavenly venerable. How could he possibly withstand the might of his gaze? If not for the fact that Ling Han didn't intend to kill him, this fellow would have died long ago. Even so, he had suffered serious injuries. It was impossible for him to recover. Without a few 100 million years of cultivation, Ling Han continued forward, but 3 people immediately leaped out and appeared in front of him. However, these 3 people didn't attack because they knew who Ling Han was. They weren't a match for him at all. Ling Han, how dare you barge into the World Alliance's territory? A second-step heavenly venerable shouted. Ling Han looked at this heavenly venerable. He didn't say anything, but a terrifying aura circulated around him, exerting an indescribable pressure on that person. Ah! That second-step heavenly venerable involuntarily cried out and retreated. He was also bleeding from his 7 orifices. He had suffered serious injuries. In front of Ling Han, what difference was there between a second step and a 9th-level heavenly venerable? They couldn't even withstand a single blow. The other 2 heavenly venerables were horrified. Not everyone had personally witnessed Ling Han's powerful combat strength, and they had always felt that the rumors were exaggerated. How could a 3rd-step heavenly venerable be this strong? But now that they had personally witnessed it, they realized that Ling Han was truly a monster. He had even surpassed the rumors. They didn't dare say anything else. Who wanted to suffer for nothing? In any case, they weren't Ling Han's match. They couldn't block him in the first place, so why bother asking for trouble? Bang bang. But Ling Han had no intention of letting them go. He punched out, and the 2 of them were instantly sent flying, crashing through countless walls along the way. The 2 of them were extremely depressed. They hadn't said anything disrespectful, so why had they also suffered a blow? Weren't you here to look for foam witting? Why did you attack them? None of them could get up. They had suffered heavy injuries from Ling Han's attack. Ling Han had a cold expression on his face. He wasn't here to spar with foam witting and see who was the strongest prodigy of the past and present. He was here to beat him up and vent his anger. Xiao xiao xiao, more Empyreans leaped out, surrounding Ling Han, but did not make a move. Even in the World Alliance, there were not many 5th-step heavenly venerables. The rest were mediocre, so how could they stop Ling Han? Therefore, no one should embarrass themselves. Ling Han clenched his right fist and punched out. What? You actually dared to take the initiative to attack? Too arrogant. Everyone exclaimed in surprise. They didn't expect Ling Han to be so arrogant and domineering in the Heaven Alliance. They all attacked together, but even though there were dozens of Empyreans, they were still forced back by this attack. Why are 5 steps so difficult to cross because of this step? It was unknown how many times more than the previous 4 steps. Ling Han's punch was unstoppable. Chapter 2930. Ling Han, you are the greatest prodigy of all time. Why must you bully the weak? A voice rang out, but it immediately calmed everyone down. It was Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake, a 5th-step cultivator. Ling Han looked over. The crowd parted, and he saw a middle-aged man slowly walking over. There was a faint smile on his face, and the image of a giant snake appeared behind him. It was several 100 meters long, and it exuded a terrifying aura. Boom! Without another word, he punched out with an iron fist. Power surged out, condensing into a giant fist that smashed toward Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake was enraged. You're too much. Who would open a fight just because they didn't agree? Do you have any respect for your status? We are all 5th-step cultivators, and we are close to the peak, but you're acting like a street thug. But he had no choice but to accept it. He was one of the 9 strongest people in the World Alliance. Others could retreat, but he could not, because he was the face of the World Alliance. Bang! He took on Ling Han's attack, but his body shook, and he involuntarily retreated more than 10 steps. The World Alliance members were all speechless when they saw this. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake was at the middle stage of 5th step. Now, no one was using their Heavenly Venerable symbols or mystic arts, and they were only using their original power to attack. But Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake was still no match for him. It was clear how powerful Ling Han was as a third-step cultivator. "You're too much," Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake roared. He had already activated his Heavenly Venerable symbol, and his strength instantly increased by more than 40 times. Boom! A terrifying aura surged, and the giant snake image behind him became more and more real, as if it was about to come to life. He took the initiative to attack, rushing toward Ling Han and punching out with his right hand. Boom! The giant snake image in the sky suddenly moved, biting toward Ling Han. Wang! Symbols lit up on the giant snake, and its aura was shockingly majestic. This was a mystic art, and it was also how he had obtained the title of Spirit Snake. Ling Han did not care. All mystic arts were ultimately about power. As long as he was powerful enough, he could crush everything. Simple, direct, and domineering. Ling Han punched out, and he also activated a Heavenly Venerable symbol. Bam! Heavenly Venerate Spirit Snake spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying. "First rank talisman," he said through gritted teeth. It wasn't that his combat strength was lacking, but that his Celestial Venerate talisman was simply too weak. Xiao! Ling Han's figure charged out, and he chased after Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake. Today he wanted to make sure that no one in the entire World Alliance could remain standing. Pung pung pung. He unleashed a series of furious punches, completely suppressing Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake, and he was soon riddled with wounds. Everyone's spirit was shaken. At first, they were still filled with confidence in Feng Wuding, but they were also at the 5th level of battle prowess. So was there really anyone who could stop Ling Han? "Stop!" A deep voice rang out, and another 8 figures appeared. They were the other 8 fifth-step powerhouses from the World Alliance who were stationed here. They could not help themselves when they saw Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake being beaten up. Otherwise, the World Alliance would definitely become a laughingstock. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake heaved a sigh of relief. If 9 fifth-step powerhouses attacked together, he did not believe that they could not suppress Ling Han. However, Ling Han pretended not to hear him, and his fist swung out even more rapidly. Pung pung pung. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake suffered another heavy blow, and he could not help but cry out in pain. He was so ashamed that he wanted to die. "Ling Han, you've gone too far." The 8 fifth-step powerhouses were all enraged, and they all attacked one after another. Anyone who could become a Heavenly Venerable was a supreme prodigy, let alone someone who had reached the 5th step. There might not even be one in several epochs. Now that there were 9 such powerhouses attacking together, even a 5th-step powerhouse would tremble. However, Ling Han did not care at all. So what if there were 9 of them? He activated a plane projection and suppressed them. After so many years, not only had he restored all 13 planes, but his physique had also improved because he had advanced to the late stage of the 3rd step, causing the upper limit of the planes he could accommodate to reach 19. If he released all 19 planes at once, he would definitely be able to catch Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake and the others off guard and make them suffer. However, he naturally could not reveal his trump card all at once. Activating a plane projection was enough. Even if it was just a plane projection, it was terrifying enough. Heavenly Venerable Spirit Snake and the others groaned, and expressions of discomfort appeared on their faces. "Plane suppression! Explode it!" The 9 people shouted and attacked one after another. Pung pung pung. After a flurry of attacks, cracks quickly appeared on the plane projection, and then it shattered with a loud bang. However, Ling Han also took advantage of this opportunity to attack. With the power of the Rage Fist enhanced by the first-class symbol, he was simply unmatched. With a single punch, he sent a 5th-step powerhouse flying. In the time it took for the plane projection to shatter, Ling Han had already sent 5 Heavenly Venerables flying. Hiss! The members of the Heaven Alliance were so shocked that their scalps went numb. No wonder Ling Han could come and go as he pleased in the Frenzy Army's camp. He was too powerful. Who among the 5th step could stop him? Could Feng Wuding do it? They had originally been quite confident, but now they were hesitating. Clap, clap, clap. A golden-haired man walked over, his body radiating a boundless aura. It was as if he was the king of the world, and anyone who saw him could only bow down and worship him. Feng Wuding, the previous generation's strongest prodigy in the origin world. Not bad, Feng Wuding said. However, his expression was completely indifferent. Ling Han, you've finally come to challenge me. Pick your sister. Ling Han roared and attacked aggressively. Challenge? Bullshit, he was here to beat people up. With the support of the first-class symbol, Ling Han's battle prowess was incomparably terrifying. No matter how self-confident Feng Wuding was, he did not dare to take him lightly. He roared. Don't think that you're the only one who has grasped the first-class symbol. An aura that could suppress all ages circulated. As expected, Feng Wuding had also activated a first-class symbol, increasing his battle prowess by more than 80 times. He was not afraid to clash head-on with Ling Han. One had to admit that Feng Wuding was truly extraordinary. A few 100 million years ago, he was still a 9th-stage celestial king. But now, not only had he reached the 3rd step, but he was even at the peak of the 3rd step. In terms of cultivation level, he had already surpassed Ling Han. With the support of a first-class symbol, his battle prowess was about the same as Ling Han's. What? Feng Wuding could not accept this. He had a slight advantage in cultivation level, but his strength was only on par with Ling Han's? No way. No way. He was the previous generation's strongest prodigy in the origin world. He was blessed by the heavens, and no one could compare to him. Why was he inferior to Ling Han? So what if it was Lin Yu Lian and Xianqihu? They could only be called the strongest prodigies across the ages, but compared to him, they could only be called ordinary prodigies. How could Ling Han be so strong? Could it be that Ling Han had extracted too much of the plane's power, allowing him to have an advantage in terms of strength? This was not impossible. Generally speaking, as long as one extracted around 100 or so planes' power, they would be able to contend with a prodigy who had nurtured a plane within their body before they reached the 3rd step. If it was a few hundred or even 1,000, they would be able to have an advantage before they reached the 5th step. That must be it. Chapter 2932. It turned out that the limit of the number of planes that a heavenly venerable's body could contain was not 2, but up to 3. Feng Wuding was also astonished. He had not expected that apart from him, there was actually someone else who could do this. Do you think that this is my limit? He shouted loudly, and the 4th plane projection was unleashed. Do you think that this is my limit? He shouted loudly, and the 4th plane projection was unleashed. Back, back, back. This time, everyone's mouths were agape, and they were completely speechless. For planes, how did he do this? Meanwhile, Ling Han smiled faintly. For dimensions, and this just barely made him feel like a child of destiny. But compared to the millions of seeds that were still only in the embryonic form of the dimensions in his body, this was only a small matter. Limited by his cultivation base, even Ling Han could not possess millions and millions of planes. Right now he only had 19. The question was, what was Feng Wuding's limit? He was somewhat curious, but he did not care. He was not here to spar with the other party, but to beat him up. Boom! He unleashed another 5 plane projections in one go. Pfft! Everyone choked. Was there something wrong with their eyes? Why did they see something that was completely impossible? 8 planes. Feng Wuding was instantly suppressed, and he retreated repeatedly. His back was even bent. The suppression from the 8 planes was too powerful, and even he couldn't bear it. However, in the next instant, he roared angrily, and boundless power surged out of his body. Hum hum hum. A total of 10 planes appeared around him. These were his true trump cards. 10 planes, an unparalleled miracle that had never been seen since ancient times. Everyone was also dumbfounded. Ling Han was already ridiculously powerful, and he possessed 8 planes. This was something that they did not even dare to imagine. However, Feng Wuding was even more monstrous, and he had taken 2 more steps forward on the impossible. This was a child of destiny. Suppress! Feng Wuding charged over with the 10 plane projections. His might was unparalleled. Among those with battle prowess at the 5th step, who could stop him? Ling Han was still speechless. He merely clenched his right fist. Wung wung wung. Another 3 plane projections were unleashed, and he instantly reversed the situation. This Everyone's brains couldn't process what was going on. So what if he was an Empyrean? This was an iron law that had been broken since ancient times. Who could still remain calm? 11 planes. Are you trying to defy the heavens? The people from the World Alliance were even more shocked, because they knew that the number of planes Ling Han truly possessed would increase by 1. Feng Wuting was also speechless. He was blessed by the heavens, so his body could easily accommodate more than 10 planes. However, he was limited by his cultivation level, so he could only allow 10 planes to grow. Although Ling Han only had one more plane than him, it was something beyond his ability. It was impossible for him to catch up. Ling Han charged straight in, bringing with him the 11 planes, and firmly suppressed Feng Wuting. Everyone was dumbfounded, and then they sighed with emotion. The previous generations chosen one of the origin world couldn't compare to Ling Han. As expected, this fellow was more monstrous. Many people felt a sense of pride. After all, Ling Han was one of them, while Feng Wuting was a remnant of the previous generation's origin world. No matter what, he had to be classified as an outsider. If it weren't for the fact that they were in a frenzy, they might have even started fighting. After all, this was considered an invasion. Feng Wuting snorted, and didn't say anything else. He just continued to exchange blows with Ling Han. He was indeed suppressed by 1 plane less than Ling Han, but he was only slightly suppressed. It wasn't to the extent of being crushed, thus he could still hold on. He was unwilling to accept this. He had placed his hopes on exhausting Ling Han's set of Empyrean symbols. Ling Han's battle prowess would plummet. Moreover, he still had a trump card. His battle prowess wasn't enough, so he couldn't avoid being hit a few times. This caused him great pain, and he also felt a strong sense of humiliation. He was a supreme genius who could surpass realms to defeat enemies. But now, he was actually being suppressed in a battle at the same level. However, 2 hours were about to pass. As expected, the light of the symbols on Ling Han's body dimmed, and his battle prowess also fell by 1,000 miles. Haha, what is called a foundation? This is it. Feng Wuting laughed loudly. Hong, another 3 symbols lit up on his body, and they were similarly supreme, capable of crushing all life. First-rate talismans heavens. Not only did he have 8 first-rate talismans, he could even form 2 sets of combination talismans, 1 set of 3 talismans, and the other set of 4 talismans. This caused his battle prowess to increase by more than 170 times, and he was still able to crush all 5th-step cultivators. Now what could Ling Han use to block him? Everyone shook their heads. Who would have thought that Feng Wuting would actually have 3 first-rate talismans, and he could even form them? This kind of battle prowess was enough to sweep away all 5th-step cultivators. Hong! Feng Wuting's palm slammed down toward Ling Han. Ling Han let out a long roar, and the 8 symbols lit up one after another. However, he controlled them, and only circulated half of them, causing his battle prowess to increase by about 500 times. But was 500 times still not enough? Bang bang bang. Ling Han completely suppressed Feng Wuting, and he rained down blow after blow, causing Feng Wuting to be like a scarecrow that could only be sent flying. Feng Wuting was completely stupefied. The reason why he had 8 first-rate talismans was because he had inherited them from the previous generation's origin world. However, he had already used up one of Ling Han's 9th-rate combination talismans, but he was still being crushed by Ling Han. He couldn't accept this. Perhaps he couldn't accept it, but he couldn't change the fact that Ling Han's battle prowess was overwhelming, and Feng Wuting could only be beaten up. I admit defeat, he said reluctantly, but he didn't want to continue being beaten by Ling Han like this. His arrogance hadn't disappeared, and he believed that this was only because his cultivation level was still too low, and he was unable to display all of his advantages as a son of heaven's mandate. For example, he had a total of 100 plain seeds in his body, but he had only managed to transform 10 of them into planes. As long as his cultivation level increased, even if his ability to fight above his cultivation level didn't improve, he would at least be able to maintain it. Everyone knew that once one's cultivation level increased, their ability to fight above their cultivation level would definitely fall. One fell, and the other maintained. Who would win in a battle between equals? A gentleman's revenge was never too late, and a real man was someone who could bow and submit when necessary. Bang! However, he had just finished speaking when a heavy punch landed on his face, causing his nose to bleed profusely. You, Foam Wooding roared. I've already admitted defeat, so why aren't you stopping? Is this how you spar? Bang! He suffered another punch. You're too much. Foam Wooding was filled with resentment. You think I'm here to spar with you? Ling Han finally spoke. Is that not the case? Wrong. I'm here to beat you up. You're no different from those cats and dogs. Don't think too highly of yourself, Ling Han said coldly as he continued to punch. What bullshit, son of heaven's mandate. Trash. These words were too hurtful. Foam Wooding wanted to die. He thought highly of himself, and believed that he was the son of heaven's mandate, and that no one could compare to him. However, Ling Han didn't care about him at all, and completely ignored him. He couldn't tolerate such disregard. Our cell phone reading is refreshing. Chapter 2933. Ling Han didn't care about anything. Just as he said, he was only here to beat people up. He didn't care if they were satisfied or not. One word: beat them up. In front of everyone, Foam Wooding, the previous Yuan world's child of destiny, had been beaten up. He had lost all face. Everyone sighed. The previous Yuan world represented the past. In this era, it still depended on the Yuan world's child of destiny, and that person seemed to be Ling Han. Ling Han did not show any mercy, and violently beat up the entire Heaven Alliance, severely injuring them. Then, he searched all the spatial containers on their bodies, and only then did he stop. He had obtained many great medicines. Those were the benefits that the World Alliance had given him. These celestial venerables had saved them, but in the end, they had all benefited Ling Han. You dare to ambush my daughter? You're really courting death, said Ling Han coldly. This was the extraterritorial battlefield, and killing was forbidden here. Otherwise, these people would have died long ago. The people from the World Alliance could only groan in pain. There shouldn't be anyone at the 5th step who could defeat Ling Han, unless they were at the 6th step. But with the evolution of the environment here, even a level 6 cultivator would have their cultivation level suppressed. Most likely, they would only be delivering themselves to death, and would not be a match for Ling Han at all. How impressive, said Xianqihu coldly. Ling Han, don't you know that private fights are forbidden here? Ling Han looked at him, and felt that this so-called eternal prodigy was incomparably disgusting. He didn't even have the mood to talk nonsense with him. Once he had enough power, he would directly beat him up. His cold expression caused Xianqihu to fly into a rage. He immediately stepped forward. Ling Han, you dare to look down on me? He attacked, pressing out with his right palm. Boom. The power of a 6th step expert surged. This power was too great, and Ling Han couldn't match it at all. But before he could retreat, Lin Yulian had already acted and blocked in front of him. She waved her jade-like hand and dissipated Xianqihu's attack. Brother Xian, don't be angry, she calmly said. Get out of the way. Xianqihu's eyes were cold. Ling Yu had a pitiful look on his face, but his expression was incomparably firm as he said, Brother Xian, enough is enough. What do you mean by enough? Xianqihu laughed heartily and charged at Ling Han. You're going too far. Lin Yulian waved her sleeve and faced Xianqihu. The two greatest geniuses of all eternity began an intense battle, both unleashing their full combat prowess. Rumble, 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 the heavens and earth trembled. Fortunately, this place had already become a foreign battlefield, and ordinary people had long since moved away. Otherwise, if they were to fight like this, who knew how many ordinary people would suffer? Even so, Ling Han and the other experts with battle prowess at the 5th step had no choice but to retreat. The shockwaves were also incomparably terrifying, and there was no need to take them head-on. After fighting for a long time, Xianqihu finally stopped. They were both the greatest geniuses of all eternity, but he couldn't do anything to Lin Yulian, and Lin Yulian couldn't do anything to him. Unless they truly fought with their lives on the line, it would be impossible to determine a victor, even if they fought for 100 million years. Xianqihu looked at Ling Han menacingly. He did not conceal the killing intent in his eyes at all. Previously, He had been secretive and used the excuse of decapitation to set a trap for Ling Han. But looking at his current expression, as long as there was a chance to attack, he would not hesitate to kill Ling Han. Ling Han fearlessly met his gaze. At worst, he would just tear open the void and leave. As long as he reached the fourth step, he would be able to completely resist Xianqihu. And if he reached the fifth step, then beating Xianqihu would be like beating his own son. He suppressed a wave of resentment in his heart. Wasn't the reason Xianqihu could be so unbridled because his cultivation was higher and he was stronger? I want to be strong. I want to become even more powerful. Ling Han clenched his fists and shouted in his heart. An incomparable thirst for power arose in his heart. Everyone dispersed one after another. Because the people's morale had long been slack, the rules of the extraterritorial battlefield weren't that strict. As long as no one was killed, no one would investigate too deeply. Thus, the matter of Ling Han destroying the World Alliance passed by in a muddle. In fact, there were only a few people and forces who really wanted to argue with Ling Han. Most people still hoped to see Ling Han grow. This time, Ling Han was only collecting some interest. He knew that the cause of the disaster was Yu Borong. The other party wanted to take revenge for his son's death, so he deliberately targeted the Ling Alliance. This debt was noted down. Time passed quietly. As the environment of the extraterritorial battlefield became more and more neutral, the Frenzy Army attacked again. They stationed themselves in the distance, ready to launch a fierce attack at any time. However, because the time and place were still in favor of the Fiery Frost dimension, the Frenzy Army chose to bide their time. At this time, there was news from the previous origin world. Wasn't there someone staying there to see if there were any missed raw stones? And not long ago, someone actually entered the 10th dimension? Was this a 7-step expert? Of course not. This was only a 3-step expert. So how could he enter the 10th dimension? It turned out that this dimension group had a spatial overlap. It wasn't the squeezing of the top and bottom. Instead, it was like the previous extraterritorial battlefield. When walking in the 2nd dimension, one might pass through a cave and arrive at the 5th or 7th dimension. That 3-step expert had entered a passage in the 4th dimension and found himself in the 10th dimension. It was at least the 10th dimension, because this place hadn't been excavated. The reason for this might be related to the emergence of Heavenly Venerable Chong Yen and the other 4 7-step experts. They were too powerful and affected the structure of this origin world. It was entirely possible because this origin world was already dead. Naturally, it couldn't withstand the power of the 7-step experts. When this news spread, people were naturally tempted. When the ancient dimensions appeared, the overall strength of Heavenly Venerables increased by a lot. However, due to their limited strength, from the 10th dimension onward, even 6-step experts couldn't set foot in it. Now, a special passage had actually been discovered. The people in the camp immediately became restless. Who would still be in the mood to sit there? Not long after, the 6-step experts sent an order to allow a portion of Heavenly Venerables to explore the previous origin world. This could improve the strength of the entire group of Heavenly Venerables, but the number of candidates was strictly limited. A total of 100 people were selected to enter the previous origin world. Ling Han was also lucky enough to get a place. In addition, peerless geniuses like Xianqihu, Wu Haoyang, and Feng Wuding were also on the list. However, Ling Yulian was excluded. She had to wait for Ling Han and the others to return before she could be rotated out. Otherwise, if all the powerful figures left, even with the suppression of heaven and earth, the Frenzy Army's attack wouldn't be able to stop them. It should be known that there was definitely a spy and frenzy among them. The truth couldn't be hidden. Among those who were on good terms with Ling Han, only White Rice was on the list. The two of them immediately set off for the previous origin world in the void. They only had 100,000 years. They had to return, or they would be treated as traitors. Chapter 2934. Ling Han brought White Rice with him as he traveled through the void. He maintained his vigilance at all times. Once he found traces of madness, he would immediately return to the origin world. he definitely wouldn't have any thoughts of getting lucky. This time, there was only him and White Rice. Because the number of people was strictly limited, the Empress, who knew, and the others stayed in the foreign battlefield, and couldn't follow him willfully. Thankfully, the frenzy did not appear. Though Ling Han was on his guard, he arrived safely and smoothly in the origin world of the last generation. After knowing the truth, Ling Han and by me both felt a different kind of feeling when they stepped onto this land again. This place used to be glorious, and once represented everything. But because of madness, it turned into ruins now, forever floating in the void. Do you think there's another origin world from the previous era? White Rice suddenly asked. Ling Han was surprised. Your imagination is too rich. That's not for sure. Maybe madness came from an even more ancient era. And even the previous origin world was like us. White Rice insisted. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. That's true. The void is so big. So maybe there are ruins of another origin world. If we can find it, then won't we be rich? White Rice's eyes lit up. He was a very calm young man. But now that they were talking about an origin world, he was naturally excited. However, Ling Han thought that if his body could also evolve into an origin world, then wouldn't he be able to get whatever he wanted? Let's go. He patted White Rice's shoulder. They had to hurry. They only had 100,000 years. 100,000 years seemed very long. But to a heaven venerable, it was pitifully short. They came to the 5th plane and searched for that passage. This didn't take too much time. The two of them were very careful because Xianqi, who also came here, he definitely wouldn't let Ling Han go, and would definitely kill him if he had the chance. Ling Han had taken a considerable amount of great medicines from the Heaven Alliance, but he had left all of them for the Empress and the others. The main reason was that he needed too many resources to take the next step forward, and this bit of great medicine would not be of much use. Thus, he might as well give it to the Empress and the others. Their improvement was obvious, and it could significantly increase their strength. I'll go take a look and see if there's an ambush, said White Rice. Ling Han was more inclined to believe that if Xianqi who had arrived earlier, then he would definitely be clinging to the treasures in the 10th plane. Therefore, he wouldn't have wasted his time waiting for him. However, it was better to be safe than sorry, so he nodded. White Rice walked over. After a while, he came back and gestured to Ling Han that he was safe. Ling Han and White Rice passed through this passageway, and they clearly didn't feel any change in space. However, as they walked, the space in front of them suddenly widened, and they appeared in another place. Although the mountains and rivers here also showed signs of development, it was not as exaggerated as the previous few levels, which were completely turned upside down. Follow me, Ling Han said. He was a master of raw gemstones. Who could compare to him in exploring raw gemstone veins? White Rice quickly followed. I say, do you know how to explore ores? Huh. Don't you know that I'm known as a little expert in exploring ores? Ling Han joked. I really didn't know, White Rice said fearlessly. He was practically challenging authority. Then you just wait and see. Not only was Ling Han exploring ores, but he was also looking for a new spatial tunnel that could lead to a deeper plane. Since a tunnel had appeared, there might be a second one, a third one, or even hundreds or thousands of them. However, their luck was not so good. For the time being, they had not discovered the spatial passageway. However, they had discovered quite a considerable number of origin stone mines. With Ling Han's precise mining, every time there was a great medicine, which caused White Rice to exclaim in disbelief. You really are a master of raw gemstones, he said in surprise. It should be known that the heavenly venerable stone could block divine sense. Even heavenly venerables couldn't penetrate it. No, I'm a grandmaster, Ling Han said with a smile. In terms of exploring ores, White Rice couldn't help much. Thus, he took the initiative to look for a spatial tunnel. Even Ling Han couldn't cheat, so he could only spend his time exploring. Moreover, this was the 10th plane, which was extremely dangerous. Occasionally, energy storms would surge out of the ground, reaching the peak of Step 6. Thus, whether it was exploring ores or looking for a spatial tunnel, they had to be extremely careful and powerful. Otherwise, if they couldn't react in time, heavenly venerables below Step 6 would die. In reality, even heavenly venerables with Step 6 battle prowess had to be extremely careful. They might not die if they were hit by an energy storm, but they would definitely be severely injured. If they were surrounded by an energy storm, they would also die. Ling Han and White Rice split the work. There were fewer people here, so there was naturally less competition. Ling Han was also a cheat-level master of raw gemstones. One could imagine how shocking his harvest was. After a few thousand years, he had collected more than 200 great medicines. Among them, there was even an orange great medicine that could help raise one's cultivation level. In addition, there were more than 10 celestial venerable symbols, but only one was a 7th-rate symbol. The rest were all 9th-rate and 8th-rate symbols. He already had them a long time ago. The great medicine is also not bad. It can raise my cultivation level. At this stage, this should be what I need the most. The celestial venerable symbol is just icing on the cake. He felt that he had almost searched everything here. It would be best if White Rice returned immediately and told him that he had found a tunnel to a lower plane. This was once a plane world. Even though countless low-level planes had been completely destroyed in the Big Bang, there were at least 1,000 planes left. Now they had only explored 10 planes. The number of planes left was astonishing. As Ling Han explored ores, he left marks and looked forward to meeting up with White Rice. However, enemies wouldn't meet if they weren't enemies. On this day, he had just found a larger vein. After opening up a few great medicines, he suddenly sensed a life aura approaching him. White Rice had returned. He stopped what he was doing and turned back to look. A person appeared. He was like an emperor. He had an unparalleled domineering aura, and everyone in the world obeyed him. Exa and Chihu Ling Han sighed. Why did whoever he didn't want to see appear? Haha, Ling Han, you delivered yourself to me. Exa and Chihu was also stunned. This was because he wasn't deliberately tracking Ling Han. It was purely a coincidence that he had come here. However, he didn't hesitate at all. He immediately charged over. Ling Han's mind flashed. Of course, he could break the void and go back. However, if he wanted to come back, he would waste a lot of time. He only had a total of 100,000 years. He definitely couldn't waste it on traveling. Therefore, he turned around and ran. Boom, boom, boom. Exa and Chihu chased after him while attacking crazily. He wanted to kill Ling Han. Chapter 2936. It's better to keep this god of wealth around in the future. Ling Han nodded. Killing Foam Wooding would not resolve his hatred. His target was Yu Borong. It's decided then. Ling Han found a safe place and started gnawing on the great herbs. 10 days passed, and he had digested 10 great herbs. However, he was still a little bit away from the peak of the 3rd step. Fortunately, the god of wealth is generous enough. There are still 4 more. Ling Han muttered to himself and started gnawing on the great herbs again. 1 was not enough, and 2 was not enough either. After gnawing on the 3rd great herb, Ling Han finally reached the peak of the 3rd step. I should have spent some time to polish my foundation. However, my body has endless planar power, which is equivalent to a millstone. It has already polished my power to an extremely pure level. In addition, I don't have much time left. I will immediately break through to the 4th step. Ling Han circulated all the heavenly venerate symbols. This was a method to communicate with the essence particles. With over 200 symbols circulating at the same time, his divine soul expanded infinitely to sense the 3rd essence energy between heaven and earth. Last time, he had spent hundreds of millions of years, but now, he didn't have that much time. I have to sense the 3rd essence particle as soon as possible. Ling Han took out the orange great herb. After thinking for a moment, he immediately started gnawing on it. He believed that he could break through to the 4th step without relying on such a great herb. However, it might take 1 billion years or even 2 billion years. He did not have that much time to waste now. Wasn't the purpose of keeping great herbs for consumption? With just a few mouthfuls, this great medicine had completely entered Ling Han's stomach. Not long after, a great many particles appeared in his mind, densely packed like stars. Although there were countless particles, they could be classified. There were 6 types in total. Two types of energy within Ling Han's body immediately resonated with two types of starlight particles, causing these particles to emit even more resplendent light. These were essence particles, Ling Han said in his heart. No wonder the orange great herb could help a heavenly venerate increase their cultivation level. This was equivalent to materializing essence particles. How would he dare to waste time? He hurriedly tried to sense the essence particles that he had yet to grasp. However, as soon as his divine sense touched it, the starlight particles immediately dimmed and quickly disappeared. Ling Han shuddered. Even if he took the great medicine, it was not certain that he could break through. It could only help. He calmed down and no longer blindly touched them. Instead, he focused on one type. The intrinsic particles repelled each other. If he was greedy and wanted to grasp all the intrinsic particles in one go, the result would be that he would not be able to obtain anything. He targeted a type of particle, constantly touching it, increasing his sensitivity to this particle. The effect of the great medicine was very short. After merely half a day, his sea of consciousness dimmed, and he could no longer sense anything. Ling Han didn't feel the slightest bit regretful. He released his soul consciousness again, covering the surrounding area. He had already left a mark on the third essence particle in his mind. Now he only needed to communicate with the real essence particle through this mark. Time passed quietly. 10 days, 100 days. More than 7,000 years later, Ling Han's spiritual sense suddenly trembled, and his face immediately revealed a happy expression. He had finally communicated with the third type of particle. Come. More than 200 heavenly venerate symbols lit up together, constantly extracting these particles into his body, increasing Ling Han's power. This was a messin. Ling Han suppressed the energy requirement of the planar plane in his body and used all his strength to extract these particles to increase his power, temper his physique, and stabilize his realm. The rest could be done slowly and couldn't be rushed. 100,000 years was too short. In the void, there were three figures hurriedly flying. Upon closer inspection, each of them was strange. They either had many hands and legs, or had many heads and many eyes. They were frenzied creations. These three monsters all exuded ruthless auras, and were extremely powerful. However, their eyes were filled with the glow of wisdom. They were definitely not comparable to those monsters that only knew how to kill. They arrived in the previous generation's origin world. As they descended, their gazes swept across the surroundings. Their bodies changed, and they took on human forms. Their auras also changed, becoming no different from humans. They strolled around, searching for clues. These were three six-step monsters. Their mission was very simple, which was to kill two people. One of them was Ling Han, and the other was Foam Wooding. After spending another 30,000 years, Ling Han finally stabilized his cultivation at 4-step. There's still a lot of room for improvement, he muttered to himself. The maximum number of dimensions that he could derive in his body had instantly increased to 137. Furthermore, the upper limit of the quality of the dimensions was also close to high level. In addition, the power of the planar plane could also increase. However, this required too much time. Even if he was given another 1 billion years, it would still be difficult. Right now he couldn't care less. His focus was to explore mines and open stones. After this increase in cultivation level, Ling Han's luck seemed to have suddenly improved. A few days later, he discovered a spatial passageway. He was now fearless. Even if he encountered Xian Chihu again, he was confident that he could put up a fight. After entering the tunnel, the space overlapped and changed. Half a day later, Ling Han arrived at the ruins of another dimension. He was definitely not the first person to come here. However, this was not the first 10 dimensions because the traces of mining were still very fresh. Hong! An energy storm violently surged out, and was just 30 meters in front of Ling Han. Ling Han was filled with heroism, and he punched out at the energy storm. Pung, the fist force surged out, and a hole actually appeared in the energy storm. After the fist force surged out, this hole did not heal for a long time. Only when Ling Han's fist force completely dissipated did the hole in the energy storm start to heal, and quickly disappear. With my battle prowess, I should just barely be able to stand at 6-step. Ling Han had an intuitive understanding. But I'm only ranked as the weakest 6th step. There was nothing he could do about it. He had not cultivated to the peak of his current realm, and could only be called a fake 6th-step battle prowess. But no matter how weak he was still a 6th-step cultivator, and he was still ridiculously powerful. Just one more step, and I will have 7th-step battle prowess. Ling Han's eyes lit up. If he reached 7th step, he would no longer need to worry about the energy storm here, or the powerful flames formed by essence particles. He would be able to completely mine all the treasures in this previous generation Yuan world. At that time, his cultivation would definitely soar, and he would be able to charge into 7th-step cultivation. Then, his battle prowess would reach an unimaginable level. I wonder where that white rice went. Ling Han muttered to himself. Forget it. I'll first gather some great herbs, and give some to that brat as compensation. He began to mine. Although he had arrived much later, with his unparalleled mining and mining abilities, in just 100 years, he had gathered more than 20 great herbs and 3 celestial venerate symbols. And he had just found a new vein of ore, and he had not even begun to explore it. However, he looked like he was listening attentively. There were sounds of battle. Fighting here was naturally a very common thing, and Ling Han did not take it to heart at first. But as the fluctuations of the battle became more and more intense, he caught a familiar aura. White rice. He was fighting with someone. Ling Han immediately leaped and skimmed toward the location of the battle. His follower was in trouble, and as the boss, how could he just stand by and watch? In just a few steps, he was already close to the battle area. He saw that White Rice was indeed fighting with someone, and his opponent was Feng Wuding. End of chapter. Cell phone reading is refreshing. Chapter 2937. Ling Han really wanted to curse. Why was it Feng Wuding again? Did he really want to be his money boy? White Rice, I'm asking you for the last time. Where is Ling Han? Feng Wuding shouted. His tone was extremely harsh and oppressive. He completely suppressed White Rice, showing that his strength was not just one level higher. This was because he had already taken 4 steps. Feng Wuding, who was at 4 steps, was now at the peak of 5 steps. Right now, he was only at the early stage of 4 steps. He believed that once he reached the middle stage of 4 steps, or at most the late stage, his battle prowess would jump to 6 steps. The Son of Destiny was indeed extraordinary. Although White Rice was monstrous, he was much weaker than Feng Wuding. His battle prowess was also close to the peak of 5 steps, but there was still a difference between them. Moreover, there was a huge gap between the two of them in terms of heavenly venerable symbols. Hence, White Rice was completely at a disadvantage, and he was continuously vomiting blood. Haha, I'm not a roundworm in Ling Han's stomach. How would I know? Although White Rice was no match for Feng Wuding, his expression was still very carefree. He did not care and continued to fight. Would Feng Wuding dare to kill him? Just like how no one dared to kill Feng Wuding, no one dared to kill White Rice unless they could kill him perfectly. Otherwise, who in the world could escape from a 7th step expert's wrath? However, although Feng Wuding did not dare to kill White Rice, he could injure him severely and humiliate him. Even if White Rice knew about the grudges between juniors, would he have the face to look for Feng Wuding? Even if he did not care about his face, Heavenly Venerable Yen and the others were not to be trifled with. White Rice used all his trump cards, but he could not match up to Feng Wuding. He could only fight as he fled. What eternal prodigy! He's just trash. Feng Wuding smirked coldly. He had suffered greatly at Ling Han's hands, but among those of the same cultivation level, only Ling Han could suppress him. Against any other prodigy, he had the upper hand. Don't forget that you were almost beaten into a retard by my brother, White Rice mocked. Feng Wuding's face immediately darkened. The humiliation of his life came from Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. In the past, Bai Mi was such a nice person full of sunshine. But now, she actually learned to have a poisonous tongue. Who knew who had influenced her? If the Empress and the others were present, they would definitely point at his nose and say, "It's you, it's you." White Rice tried to escape, but Feng Wuding was not the only one here. There were two other fifth-step experts from the World Alliance, and they tried to stop him. These two Step 5 cultivators were not stronger than White Rice, but they did not need to defeat White Rice. All they needed to do was stall him for a while, and let Feng Wuting catch up. If Ling Han dares to appear again, I'll definitely teach him a lesson, said Feng Wuting coldly. He was currently at the fourth step, and his strength was incomparable to when he was at the third step. He could absolutely sweep through all fifth-step experts. Oh, how do you want to teach me? Ling Han smiled. He took a step forward and appeared beside by me. When they saw Ling Han, the two Step 5 cultivators from the World Alliance could not help but be shocked, and actually did not dare to make a move. The shadow in their hearts was too great. In the past, Ling Han had defeated 9 great fifth-step elites from the World Alliance by himself. Now there were only 2 of them. So what could they use to stop Ling Han? Ling Han? Bai Mi was startled. He had not thought that Ling Han would actually appear at such a crucial time. Ling Han, Feng Wuting said through gritted teeth. He was filled with hatred. Ling Han did not care, and said, "We haven't seen each other for such a long time, and you've already advanced 4 steps. Looks like you've taken quite a lot of great medicine." Even if Feng Wuting's cultivation speed was astonishing, it was still impossible for him to advance 4 steps in just a few thousand years. He must have obtained a considerable amount of great medicine. Speaking of great medicine, Feng Wuting's expression darkened even further. He had already been dissuaded by Ling Han twice, and was still suppressing a bellyful of anger. "Ling Han, today, I'll let you experience what it means to be a son of destiny," he roared angrily, and charged over. Ling Han casually threw out a punch, appearing to be at ease. "You've advanced 4 steps, but haven't I?" The slower his advancement was, the more terrifying his explosive power would be once he broke through. Pung! It was only a single punch, and Feng Wuting was sent flying, spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Battle prowess of level 6. Feng Wuting's face was deathly pale. Battle prowess of level 5. Even if it was the peak stage of level 5, so what? Forcibly taking on battle prowess of level 6 would only result in him being badly injured. His face was filled with disbelief. He had suffered 10,000 points of damage. Wasn't that right? He considered himself to be extraordinary, and was the son of destiny. But they were both in the early stage of level 4, and his battle prowess was only at the peak stage of level 5. Though he could sweep over all battle prowess of level 5, he was still very far away from level 6. But Ling Han had reached battle prowess of level 6, which was the real deal. With this comparison, wasn't the gap between the two of them obvious? But Feng Wuting could not accept this. If he had been suppressed by Ling Han when he was at level 3, then so be it. But now he was already at level 4. The higher the cultivation level, the greater the advantage he, the son of destiny, should be. Instead, it was Ling Han who had shaken him off. Could it be that he, the son of destiny, was just joking? Feng Wuting's pride could not accept this result. But no matter how monstrous he was, no matter how many powerful moves he used, his battle prowess of level 5 could not advance to level 6. The gap was as huge as the sky. It was just like how Ling Han was strong enough. But when he was at level 3, he could not advance his battle prowess to level 6 no matter what. He could only be beaten up, and very quickly, his skin and flesh were split open. He looked like Bai Mi good fight. Bai Mi applauded. At the same time he was filled with shock. Ling Han's battle prowess was already at level 6, and he was just 1 step away from level 7. At that time, he would truly stand at the peak of the world, and he would not be restricted by anything. Ling Han only wanted to beat Feng Wuting up, but he did not want to kill him. Though he had a huge grudge with World Alliance, Feng Wuting had not done anything evil. It was just that it was very coincidental, and very unfortunate, that he had joined World Alliance. Furthermore, Feng Wuting was Ling Han's boy of wealth. This fellow had been heavily nurtured by World Alliance, and he had many treasures on him. He should be sheared like sheep, and Ling Han could not bear to kill him. Just as he was fighting to his heart's content, Ling Han suddenly felt 3 terrifying auras sweep over. 6 steps, 6 steps, 6 steps. While he was stunned, the 3 auras had already closed in, and 3 people appeared. He did not recognize any of them, and they were all extremely unfamiliar. There were over 100 level 6 in the origin world, and Ling Han had seen over 70 of them. It was normal that he did not recognize the 3 people in front of him. It was just that these 3 level 6 heavenly venerables gave him a strange feeling, but he could not tell what was wrong at the moment. The 3 level 6 heavenly venerables swept their gazes, and they immediately locked onto Ling Han. To be precise, they locked onto Ling Han and Feng Wuding. Seniors, please save Feng Wuding. He is a level 7. The 2 level 5 heavenly venerables from World Alliance hurriedly asked the 3 level 6 heavenly venerables for help. End of chapter. Cell phone reading is refreshing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.